Arizona Territory, 1875. The sun bleeds across the horizon as Sister Maria kneels in the dust, her habit torn, rosary clutched in trembling fingers. Around her, warriors paint their faces for the ritual that will end her life. Their tribe believes her blood will bring rain to the parched land. But one man stands apart, Tejano, a battle-scarred Apache whose dreams speak of another path. Against the wishes of his people, he steps forward, claiming the pale-faced woman holds medicine stronger than her death could offer. In her teachings, he believes, lies salvation for a people on the brink of annihilation. Two souls from worlds apart, bound by desperation and destiny. She prays for deliverance, he seeks ancient wisdom. But can faith survive when everything you believe is challenged? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sister Maria Catalina de la Cruz had not always known the taste of dust. In her childhood in Seville, she had known the scent of orange blossoms and the cool stones of the cathedral where her father, a devoted carpenter, had crafted ornate confessionals. The youngest of 5 daughters, Maria had grown up in the shadow of the church, finding solace in its rituals when her mother passed from fever. At 17, when other girls prepared for marriage, Maria found herself drawn to a different calling. God speaks to me in silence, she had told the Mother Superior who had taken her under wing. In the quiet moments between prayers, I hear him most clearly. That had been 12 years ago. Now, at 29, the delicate features of her youth had been tempered by the harsh Arizona sun, her once soft hands calloused from work that would have shocked her father. The Mission San Xavier del Bac had been her home for the past 3 years, its whitewashed walls rising from the desert like a mirage, its bell marking the hours of her devotion. The bell. Maria could still hear its clear, resonant tone in her mind as she knelt in captivity. How strange that such a familiar sound should haunt her now, so far from the mission's protective walls. Each morning for 3 years, she had risen at its first toll, joining the other sisters in prayer before the day's work began. Mission San Xavier had been established by Jesuit fathers nearly a century before, but now the Franciscans tended to its aging stones and the souls who sought shelter there. The mission served as school, hospital, and sanctuary to a scattered community of settlers and peaceful O'odham natives who had adopted the Christian faith. Maria had come to love them all, especially the children she taught to read from worn primers and tattered Bibles. Sister Maria teaches with patience. Father Esteban had commented during her last evaluation. The children respond to her gentleness. But I worry she is too trusting of those outside our walls. His words had proven prophetic. The drought had strained relations between all peoples of the territory. 3 seasons without proper rain had withered crops and dried waterholes. Cattle died with bloated bellies around shrinking muddy pools. The settlers blamed the natives blamed the settlers. And Maria, against the warnings of Father Esteban, had continued her weekly journeys to the outlying homesteads, bringing medicine and prayer to those in need. The risk grows too great, the father had cautioned just days before the raid. There are Apache bands moving through the territory. They are desperate, and desperate men do desperate things. All the more reason they need God's mercy, Maria had replied, adjusting the small wooden cross that hung at her neck. I cannot abandon those who suffer when Christ commands us to serve. The mission's cool interior had offered no hint of the danger that awaited beyond its thick adobe walls. Maria had spent that final morning polishing the silver bell that hung in the modest tower. Its surface had reflected her face in distorted fragments, a woman she sometimes barely recognized as herself. Her eyes, once bright with zealous certainty, had begun to show shadows of doubt. The drought troubled her faith more than she admitted to her fellow sisters. How could God allow such suffering? The O'odham children grew thinner each week. 2 infants had died despite her desperate prayers and the herbal remedies she had learned from Sister Agnes. Perhaps we are being tested, Sister Agnes had suggested, her ancient fingers continuing to sort dried herbs as they spoke. Or perhaps we have not listened closely enough to what God is trying to tell us. Maria had pondered those words as she rode out that fateful day, A small party of 3 sisters and 2 mission guards traveling to the Henderson homestead where twin boys had fallen ill with fever. They had never arrived. The attack came suddenly, warriors appearing like spirits from the mesquite, their faces painted for war, their movements precise and deadly. The guards had fallen first, arrows finding gaps in their simple armor. Sister Agnes had been struck next as she tried to calm the panicking horses. Maria remembered holding Sister Josephina's hand as they prayed, the younger nun's words cut short by a warrior's club. Then rough hands had pulled Maria across a horse, a blindfold tightened around her eyes. For 3 days, she had traveled in darkness, the rosary beads her only connection to the life she had known. When the blindfold was finally removed, she found herself in a camp far from any place she recognized, surrounded by people whose language she did not speak, facing death at their hands. Until he stepped forward. The warrior called Tejano, whose eyes held something she had not expected to find, recognition, as if he had been waiting for her arrival. As if her capture had been not chance, but destiny. Tejano walked the edge of the camp, fingers absently touching the small leather pouch that hung at his waist. Inside lay the treasures of his life, an eagle feather from his first vision quest, a stone smooth as a teardrop from the river where his mother had died, a silver button from a cavalry officer's coat, and a small carved figure of a bear his father had made before the smallpox took him. The medicine pouch was more than a collection of objects. It was the story of his journey, both physical and spiritual. Unlike most in his band, Tejano had spent years among the white settlers. At 12 summers, he had been captured during a raid gone wrong. Rather than being killed, he had been taken in by a rancher named Thomas Holloway, a man with more compassion than sense, according to his neighbors. For 3 years, Tejano, then called Thomas's Indian boy, had lived between worlds, learning the white man's language, his ways of farming, his strange god who had died on crossed sticks. "You're a bright one," Holloway had told him, teaching him to read from a worn Bible in the evenings. "You could make something of yourself if you stay." But at 15, when Tejano dreamed 3 nights in a row of his ancestors calling him home, he had slipped away, taking only a knife, the clothes on his back, and the knowledge he had gained. The journey back to his people had nearly killed him. When he finally found a band of his tribe, he was half-starved and speaking a mixture of Apache and English that made the elders regard him with suspicion. "He is touched by the white man's ways," they had whispered. "His spirit is divided." His reintegration had been difficult. Some called him White Eyes behind his back, questioning his loyalty. Only his mother's brother, the medicine man Nate, had truly welcomed him, seeing value in Tejano's knowledge of the enemy. "You have walked in their world and returned. This is a gift, not a curse," Nate had told him, beginning Tejano's training in the spiritual traditions of their people. Over the next decade, Tejano had proven himself a capable warrior, but never fully shed the label of outsider. He hunted better than most, fought bravely in skirmishes with both settlers and rival tribes, and yet remained apart, too Apache for the white world, too influenced by white ways for many in the tribe. The dreams had begun during the second season of drought. Vivid visions of a woman with skin like the moon and eyes the color of the sky, wearing black robes and carrying power that could heal the land. Night after night, the same dream came to him, the woman standing at the edge of their territory, a shadow of death behind her, but her hands filled with water and growing things. When he had shared these visions with Nate, the old medicine man had nodded slowly, his face revealing nothing. "There are prophecies," Nate had said after a long silence, "of one who would come from beyond, bringing change. Some say destruction, some say salvation. The stories are old, from before the Spanish came with their crosses and diseases." "Is she an enemy or ally?" Tejano had asked. Nate had thrown dried herbs on the small fire between them, studying the pattern of smoke. "That depends on you, sister's son. On how you guide what is to come." When Chief Nantai had led the raid on the mission outpost and returned with the black-robed woman, Tejano had recognized her immediately. The same face that had haunted his dreams now stared at him with terrified eyes, clutching small beads and murmuring prayers to her god. The tribe had suffered greatly in recent months. Game was scarce, water sources dwindling, and 2 children had died of hunger. The tribal council, led by Nantai, had decided that a significant sacrifice was needed to appease the spirits and bring rain. The captured nun would serve this purpose. Blood for water. It is the old way, Nantai had declared, his voice carrying the weight of authority as he stood tall before the council fire, his face lined with hunger and determination. Tahano had kept silent that night, watching the woman from the shadows of his dwelling, wrestling with the meaning of his dreams. When morning came and preparation for the sacrifice began, he could remain silent no longer. He approached the council, medicine pouch in hand. This woman was sent by the spirits, he had announced, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. Not for her blood, but for her medicine. My dreams have shown me this truth. Nantai had laughed bitterly. Your dreams are tainted by your time among the white eyes. You still think like them? I think like one who has seen both worlds, Tahano had replied calmly, though his heart raced. And the spirits speak to me of a different path. A chance to save our people. The debate had raged until Nach, respected for his wisdom despite his advanced age, had proposed a compromise. Let Tahano keep the woman alive until the next full moon. If rain does not come, if her medicine proves false, then we will have our sacrifice. And so Sister Maria had been spared, tied to a stake outside Tahano's dwelling, her life now bound to his promise. A promise made on the strength of dreams that even he did not fully understand. The sacred pipe passed from hand to hand around the council fire, its carved bowl glowing red with each deep inhalation. Chief Nantai took the final draw, exhaling a cloud of smoke toward the stars before setting the pipe on its ceremonial stand. The carved eagle that formed the pipe's stem seemed to watch Maria with unblinking wooden eyes. The woman stays alive until the next full moon, Nantai announced, his voice carrying no warmth. Then we will see if Tahano's dreams hold water, unlike our creek beds. The last words brought bitter laughter from several warriors. Maria understood little of what was said, but the tension surrounding her name needed no translation. 3 days had passed since her capture, days filled with terror and prayer. She had witnessed Sister Josefina's murder, had been forced to ride blindfolded for countless hours, her wrists bound so tightly they still bore raw marks. Now she knelt at the edge of the council, a captive audience to decisions about her fate in a language she barely comprehended. Tahano rose from his place in the circle. In the firelight, his face appeared carved from the same red stone that surrounded them. I will teach her our ways, he said in Apache. Then, to Maria's surprise, he switched to heavily accented Spanish. You will learn. You will help my people. Or you will die. Maria raised her chin, finding courage in the familiar weight of her rosary. I serve only God and His church, she replied in Spanish, her voice steadier than she felt. Tahano's expression remained impassive. Your God did not save you from us. Perhaps he sent you to us instead. The blasphemy of his words made her flinch. God tests the faithful, she countered. Then consider this your test, Tahano replied, turning away to speak with an elderly man whose wrinkled face and adorned staff marked him as significant to the tribe. As the council dispersed, women approached to lead Maria to a small wickiup at the edge of the encampment. One, barely older than a girl, offered a clay cup of water. Maria hesitated before thirst overcame caution. The water was warm but clean, and she nodded her thanks. That night, lying on a bed of woven grass mats, Maria replayed the raid in her mind. The attack had come without warning. One moment they were traveling the dusty road toward the Henderson homestead, Sister Agnes telling a story about her childhood in Boston, the next moment filled with war cries and flying arrows. Maria had seen Guardsman Torres fall first, an arrow protruding from his throat, his pistol unfired. Sister Josefina had screamed, the sound cut short by a warrior's club. Sister Agnes had tried to calm the panicking horses, her ancient hands still strong on the reins, until 3 arrows found her chest. Maria remembered praying, words tumbling from her lips without thought, Latin phrases memorized since childhood offering no protection as rough hands pulled her from the wagon. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by unfamiliar sounds, coyotes calling in the distance, the creak of leather as guards shifted position, the soft crying of a child somewhere in the camp. Before dawn, Maria was startled awake by a presence at the entrance to her shelter. "Come," Tejano said simply, holding aside the covering. Outside, the eastern sky showed the first hint of light. The camp was stirring, women rekindling fires, children carrying water from some unseen source. Tejano led her to a flat rock overlooking the encampment, motioning for her to sit. "Watch the sun," he instructed, pointing east. Too exhausted to argue, Maria obeyed. As light spilled across the desert, painting the rocks in shades of gold and crimson, Tejano began to sing softly, a melody unlike any she had heard before, rising and falling like the contours of the land itself. When he finished, he turned to her. "This is the morning song. It greets Father-Son as he begins his journey." "I pray to God at dawn as well," Maria said carefully. "Though not with song." Tejano nodded. "Different words, same purpose." He pointed to the camp below. 37 people. 18 are children. 6 are elderly. All are hungry. The simple count struck Maria with unexpected force. Not savages but people, families with children, with elders to care for. Her gaze found a group of young ones gathered around a cooking fire, their ribs visible even at this distance. "The drought," she began. 3 seasons, Tejano confirmed. "Game moves away. Plants wither. Water holes dry up." He fixed her with a penetrating stare. "At the mission you helped grow food. You treated the sick. These things you will now do for my people." It wasn't a request but a statement of fact. Maria looked away, her hands finding her rosary beads. "I don't understand why I'm here," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Understanding comes with time," Tejano replied, standing. "Like rain." On the 3rd day of her captivity, Maria discovered a small miracle tucked inside her torn habit. Her journal had survived. Small enough to fit in her palm, bound in faded leather with thin pages of cheap paper, it had been a gift from Father Esteban when she first arrived at Mission San Xavier. "For your reflections on God's work in this new land," he had said. Now, hidden beneath a corner of her sleeping mat, it became her sanctuary. Using a charred stick from the cooking fire, Maria began to write in the dim light of evening, her words tiny to conserve space. Asterisk 7th day of May, 1875. "I live, though Sisters Agnes and Josefina have gone to God's embrace. I am held by Apache, though not the band we know from near the mission. These are people from farther north, driven south by drought and hunger. Their leader, a chief named Nantai, wished to sacrifice me to bring rain. Another, called Tejano, intervened, claiming I possess some medicine or power. They have given him until the next full moon to prove his claims. I count 17 days, asterisk. Asterisk I should feel only fear, yet I find myself watching these people with strange curiosity. Their ways are primitive, yes, but ordered. Children are everywhere treasured. The elderly respected. If only they knew Christ's teachings, asterisk." Maria paused, the charcoal stick hovering over the page. What would Christ do in her position? Surely he would attempt to convert these heathens, to bring them salvation. Yet her immediate concern was survival, hers, and she was beginning to realize, theirs as well. She continued writing. Asterisk the warrior Tejano speaks some Spanish. He lived among settlers as a boy. He watches me with unsettling intensity, as if expecting me to perform some miracle. This morning he showed me how they greet the sunrise with song. I said nothing of how this reminds me of Lauds, our morning prayer. Some things are best kept silent, asterisk. A shadow fell across the entrance to her shelter. Maria quickly tucked the journal into the folds of her habit as an elderly woman entered, carrying a wooden bowl. The woman's face was deeply lined, her silver hair bound in 2 long braids. Without speaking, she placed the bowl beside Maria and gestured for her to eat. The stew contained unfamiliar plants and small pieces of meat. Maria's stomach clenched with hunger, but she hesitated. Seeing this, the old woman sighed, took the bowl, and ate a spoonful herself before returning it. "Eat," she said in accented Spanish, surprising Maria. "Strong." Maria nodded her thanks and began to eat. The stew was gamey but flavorful with herbs she didn't recognize. As she ate, The old woman settled nearby, watching her with dark, intelligent eyes. "You speak Spanish," Maria ventured between bites. The old woman nodded. "Mission long ago. Before soldiers came." She touched her chest. "Inzuna." "Your name?" Maria asked. When the woman nodded, Maria touched her own chest. "Maria." "Marie," Inzuna repeated, then pointed to the rosary beads visible at Maria's waist. "I know these. Prayers to your God." "Yes," Maria replied, instinctively touching the beads. "They help me speak to God." Inzuna's expression remained neutral. "Many gods. Many ways to speak." She rose with surprising grace for her age. "Tomorrow, you work. Women dig roots. You help." After the old woman left, Maria retrieved her journal. The elder woman is called Inzuna. She spent time at a mission in her youth and speaks some Spanish. She has shown me the first kindness since my capture. Tomorrow I am to help the women gather food. I will learn what I can about these people while I pray for deliverance. Yet I wonder, is my presence here truly chance? Or does God have purpose in this trial? Father Esteban often said God works in mysterious ways. Perhaps my capture is his will, though I cannot fathom why. The next morning came early, with Tejano appearing at dawn to escort her to the morning ritual. This time, several children gathered around, staring at her with undisguised curiosity. One small boy reached out to touch her habit, then ran away giggling when she smiled at him. "They have not seen a woman of your color before," Tejano explained. "Or such strange clothing." "My habit is the symbol of my vows to God," Maria replied, straightening the torn garment as best she could. Tejano studied her. "It will not last in this place. Soon you will need to dress as our women do." The thought of abandoning her habit, even in its damaged state, sent a wave of panic through Maria. "No. This marks me as a bride of Christ." "Here, it marks you as an outsider," Tejano said flatly. "And outsiders are not trusted." After the morning song, Inzuna appeared with several other women, carrying digging sticks and woven baskets. They gestured for Maria to join them. With a final glance at Tejano, who nodded encouragement, Maria followed the women away from camp. The day passed in backbreaking labor under the merciless sun. The women showed her how to identify certain plants, how to dig for roots and bulbs that stored precious water. They spoke among themselves in Apache, occasionally using Spanish words when directing Maria. By midday, her hands were blistered, her back aching. But the basket gradually filled with small tubers and roots, each one representing survival. That night, Maria wrote in her journal by moonlight, "I have lived one day as they live. My body aches, yet there is strange satisfaction in the work. These women are strong beyond measure. They laugh despite hunger, care for each other despite hardship. I begin to understand that my survival depends not on escape, but on becoming useful. God grant me strength and wisdom for whatever purpose He has placed me here." A week into her captivity, Maria woke to urgent voices outside her shelter. Dawn had barely broken, the air still cool from the night. She wrapped her tattered habit around herself and peered outside to see a cluster of women gathered at a nearby wickiup, their faces drawn with concern. At the center stood Tejano, his normally stoic expression replaced by evident worry. Inzuna spotted Maria and beckoned her over. "Child sick," she explained in her limited Spanish. "Very hot. No wake." Through the group, Maria could see a small girl of perhaps 5 years lying on a mat. Her skin glistened with sweat, her breathing shallow and rapid. A young woman, the mother, Maria guessed, knelt beside her, singing softly through tears. Nate, the elderly medicine man Maria had seen at the council, crouched near the child, grinding herbs in a small stone bowl. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, but his eyes revealed doubt. "What is wrong with her?" Maria asked Inzuna. The old woman shook her head. "Bad spirit. 3 days now. Medicine not helping." Maria moved closer, her nursing instincts overriding caution. She knelt beside the child and gently placed a hand on the small forehead. The skin burned beneath her touch. "Fever," dangerously high. "May I?" she asked, looking to the mother for permission. The woman stared at Maria with a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope, then nodded once. Maria carefully examined the child, checking her throat, feeling the glands in her neck, noting the rash that spread across her chest. The symptoms reminded her of scarlet fever, which had swept through the mission school the previous winter. Sister Agnes had taught Maria how to treat it with willow bark tea to reduce fever and honey mixtures for the sore throat. "I have seen this sickness before," Maria said, looking up at Tejano. "At the mission, we used certain plants to help the children recover." Tejano translated her words, causing a ripple of murmurs through the gathered tribe members. Nate stopped grinding his herbs, his gaze sharp on Maria. "What plants?" he asked in Apache, with Tejano translating. "Willow bark for the fever," Maria replied. "And sage for the chest. Cool water on the skin. Honey for the throat." Nate nodded slowly. "We use willow bark also. And other herbs." He gestured to his stone bowl. "But the child grows worse." Maria hesitated, then made a decision. "In my world we also pray for the sick. Perhaps both our medicines together might be stronger." When Tejano translated this, Nate studied Maria for a long moment, then nodded again. "Two paths may lead to the same destination," he said. "We will try both ways." Over the next hours, Maria worked alongside Nate, combining her nursing knowledge with his traditional remedies. They steeped willow bark in water, added herbs that Nate selected from his medicine bundle. Maria showed them how to create cool compresses for the child's forehead, while Nate performed a ceremony with sacred smoke that made Maria think of incense in the cathedral. As she worked, Maria quietly prayed, her rosary beads moving through her fingers. The mother watched with wide eyes as this strange woman in torn black robes murmured words in Latin while tending to her daughter. By midday, the child's fever seemed unchanged. The mother's hope began to fade, and whispers spread through the camp that the white woman's medicine was no stronger than their own. In her desperation, Maria retreated to her shelter and pulled 2 small pieces of wood from the ground. Using a piece of sinew she had saved from her dinner the previous night, she bound the sticks together in the form of a cross. It was crude and small, but it centered her thoughts and renewed her determination. When she returned to the sick child's side, Maria placed the cross beside the girl's mat. Nate raised an eyebrow but did not object. They continued their treatments through the afternoon, Maria alternating between practical nursing and fervent prayer. As evening approached, the child's breathing remained labored. Maria felt a growing sense of failure. If she couldn't save this one child, how could she possibly prove her worth to the tribe? The next full moon loomed as a deadline not just for her, but now for this innocent child as well. "We must keep trying," she told Tejano as darkness fell. "I need more cool water and fresh willow bark." While Tejano went to fulfill her request, Maria sat alone with the exhausted mother and feverish child. Unable to communicate with words, she reached out and took the woman's hand in her own. Their eyes met, transcending the barriers of language and culture, 2 women united in concern for a suffering child. In that moment, something shifted in Maria's heart. These were not savages to be converted or enemies to be feared. They were people, desperate, suffering people who loved their children as fiercely as any mother in Seville or at the mission. She squeezed the woman's hand and smiled gently. "Together," she said, knowing the word wouldn't be understood but hoping the sentiment might. To her surprise, the mother squeezed back and nodded. When Tejano returned with the supplies, he found the 2 women sitting side by side, the mother now helping Maria prepare the willow bark tea. The small wooden cross lay between them, no longer a symbol of division but simply another tool in their shared arsenal against death. "Perhaps," Tejano said quietly as he set down the water, "this is the medicine I dreamed of." By the time the sun rose on the 10th day of Maria's captivity, the child's fever had broken. Little Talisi, Maria had finally learned her name, sat up weakly, accepting spoonfuls of thin broth from her grateful mother. The news spread through the camp quickly. The pale woman's medicine, combined with Nature's, had driven away the sickness. That morning, when Maria emerged from her shelter, women nodded to her with newfound respect. Even Chief Nantai, who had avoided her since. The council meeting acknowledged her with a slight inclination of his head as he passed. "You have bought yourself time," Tahano told her as they walked toward the morning gathering. "But one child healed does not bring rain." "I never claimed to control the weather," Maria replied, adjusting her rosary beads. "Only God commands the skies." Tahano's expression remained impassive. "Then perhaps your God and our spirits should have a conversation. The water holes grow smaller each day." After the morning ritual, Tahano led Maria away from the camp, following a narrow trail that wound between rocky outcroppings. The sun climbed higher, its heat intensifying with each passing hour. Maria's lips grew parched, her habit sticking uncomfortably to her skin. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "To find water," Tahano replied simply. "If you are to live among us, you must learn how not to die." They walked in silence for another hour before Tahano stopped abruptly, crouching to examine the ground. Maria watched as he brushed away surface sand to reveal slightly darker soil beneath. "Water is life," he said, looking up at her. "Without it, nothing else matters. Not your God, not our spirits, not medicine or prayer." He handed her a weathered gourd with a leather strap. Maria recognized it as a water container similar to those carried by the women in camp. This one was older, its surface decorated with faded symbols she couldn't decipher. "This was my mother's," Tahano explained. "Now it is yours. You will learn to keep it filled." Maria accepted the gourd with appropriate solemnity. "Thank you," she said, running her fingers over the carved patterns. "What do these symbols mean?" "They tell the story of the first rain," Tahano replied. "When Yuzin, the life-giver, poured water from the sky to quench the thirst of all creatures." He pointed to spiral patterns etched near the neck of the gourd. "These are the clouds. These are the raindrops. And this," he indicated a series of small dots, "is our people, dancing with gratitude." Maria studied the symbols with new appreciation. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. Tahano nodded, then returned to his lesson. "In the desert, water hides. You must learn to see with more than your eyes." He gestured at the landscape around them. "What do you see?" Maria looked carefully. "Rocks. Some scrubby plants." "Look again," Tahano instructed. "Where are the birds going? Which plants grow taller? Where does the soil change color?" Following his gaze, Maria began to notice subtler patterns. A slight greenness to vegetation in a particular direction, small birds flitting toward a distant cluster of trees, a barely perceptible depression in the land. "There," she said, pointing toward the trees. "Water might be there." Tahano nodded approvingly. "You learn quickly." He led her toward the spot she had indicated. As they drew closer, Maria could see a small seep spring emerging from between rocks, creating a muddy pool barely larger than her two hands together. "It doesn't look like much," she remarked, disappointed. "It is enough," Tahano replied. "More than many find." He showed her how to clear debris from the spring and wait patiently for clean water to gather. "Take small sips. Do not rush. The water has waited for you, you can wait for it." As the afternoon progressed, Tahano taught Maria how to identify plants that stored water, which cactus fruits were safe to eat, how to recognize signs of water beneath the ground. He showed her how to cover her head with cloth to prevent sunstroke and how to find shade when the sun was at its zenith. "The desert gives life if you know how to ask," he explained as they sheltered beneath an overhang during the hottest part of the day. "But it does not forgive ignorance." "At the mission, we had wells and irrigation ditches," Maria said. "We never had to search for water like this." "And when the wells run dry?" Tahano asked. "What then?" Maria had no answer. The mission's largest well had indeed been alarmingly low when she left. Father Esteban had been considering whether to deepen it, a costly and difficult undertaking. On their return journey, they encountered a small party of hunters from the tribe. Among them was Chief Nantai, who carried a lean jackrabbit over his shoulder, meager prey for hours of hunting. "The game moves north," Nantai told Tahano in Apache. "Even the deer abandon us." Tahano translated for Maria, who noticed the tension in the chief's shoulders, the worry lines deepening around his eyes. For all his hostility toward her, Nantai carried the weight of his people's survival. She recognized the burden of leadership. Father Esteban wore the same expression when supplies ran low at the mission. "Tell him I will pray for better hunting tomorrow," Maria said impulsively. When Tejano translated, Nantai gave a short, bitter laugh. "Prayers do not fill empty bellies," he replied, but Maria detected a flicker of desperate hope beneath his scorn. That evening, as the tribe shared the day's limited harvest, Maria found herself seated near Talisi and her mother. The little girl offered Maria a small piece of her rabbit meat, a precious gift given their scarcity. Moved by the child's generosity, Maria accepted with a smile and a "gracias." Later, in her journal, she wrote, "I begin to understand this harsh land and the people shaped by it. Their knowledge of finding water in seemingly barren places would be valuable at the mission. We have much to learn from each other, if only pride and fear could be set aside. I carry a water gourd now that once belonged to Tejano's mother. Its weight against my hip reminds me that survival here depends on wisdom passed through generations. Perhaps God has placed me here not to teach, but to learn." 2 weeks into her captivity, Maria's habit had deteriorated beyond reasonable repair. The rough work, desert thorns, and nightly washings had reduced the once sturdy black cloth to a collection of fraying pieces barely held together by her increasingly creative stitching. Each morning, she spent precious minutes repairing new tears, aware that the women of the tribe watched her struggles with a mixture of curiosity and growing impatience. "It is time," Inzuna said one morning, entering Maria's shelter without preamble. In her arms, she carried a bundle of soft, tanned buckskin. "These will fit. Made by my daughter." Maria looked at the clothing, then down at her tattered habit. The decision before her was about more than practicality. Her habit represented her vows, her identity, her connection to the life she had known. To set it aside felt like abandonment. "I cannot," she said softly. "This garment marks me as a bride of Christ." Inzuna's weathered face remained patient. "Christ knows you without black clothes. Here, black clothes will kill you." She gestured toward the desert beyond. "Sun too hot. Work too hard. You need to move like a Apache woman." Maria ran her fingers over the buckskin, soft, well-crafted, infinitely more practical than her heavy woolen habit. "May I keep my rosary and cross?" she asked. "Yes," Inzuna replied. "Spirit things important." She placed the bundle beside Maria. "I return when sun higher." Left alone, Maria held her decision in silent prayer. "Lord, you know my heart and my vows. Is it faithlessness to set aside these outward symbols when necessity demands it? Or is it pride to cling to them? She thought of Christ's teachings about the Sabbath being made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Perhaps the habit, too, was meant to serve faith, not become an impediment to survival. When Inzuna returned, Maria had made her choice. With the old woman's help, she removed what remained of her habit, folding it carefully and placing it beneath her sleeping mat. The Apache clothing, a simple dress of soft buckskin with leggings and moccasins, felt startlingly light and cool against her skin. Her movements, previously restricted by the heavy habit, became fluid and free. "Good," Inzuna nodded approvingly. "Now you can work without falling down." Maria kept her white coif covering her hair and her rosary beads at her waist, small connections to her vocation. When she emerged from her shelter in her new attire, she felt exposed, vulnerable. Children stopped their play to stare. Women paused in their tasks, evaluating the transformation. Maria felt blood rush to her face under their scrutiny. Tejano approached, his expression unreadable. "Now you will not die of heat stroke," he said practically. "Come." The women go to gather yucca roots. "You will help." The day passed in hard work under the relentless sun. Maria found herself grateful for the lighter clothing as she dug in the rocky soil alongside the tribal women. They spoke among themselves in Apache, occasionally including her with gestures or simple words. Maria began to recognize patterns in their speech, to match words with objects or actions. "This? What name?" she asked repeatedly, pointing to plants, tools, actions. By midday, She had collected a small vocabulary, tu for water, cisso for tree, til for plant. The women seemed pleased by her efforts, correcting her pronunciation with good-natured laughter. One young woman named Nazcha took particular interest in teaching Maria, exaggerating the sounds until Maria could reproduce them correctly. "Your tongue is stiff like old leather," Nazcha teased in halting Spanish. "Must make soft, flexible." That evening, as the tribe gathered to share the day's meager harvest, Maria found herself seated among the women rather than apart. Wearing their clothing, learning their language, sharing their labor, these simple acts had shifted her status subtly but significantly. Chief Nantai, passing by the cooking fire, paused to study Maria in her new attire. "The black crow becomes a desert dove," he commented to Tejano in Apache. "She adapts," Tejano replied. "As we all must to survive." Later, in her shelter, Maria wrote in her journal, "Today I set aside my habit for practical clothing. I feared it would feel like betrayal, but instead there is strange freedom. My vows live in my heart, not in cloth. The women accept me more readily now that I dress as they do. I learn their words, they correct me with patience. Small steps toward understanding, yet I wonder what Father Esteban would think to see me now. Would he consider me fallen? Lost to the faith? Or would he see Christ's work in unexpected forms? The sisters at the mission pray for my rescue, no doubt. But with each passing day, I grow less certain what form that rescue should take. As she wrote, a shadow appeared at her doorway. Maria looked up to find Talisi, the child she had helped heal, standing shyly at the entrance. In her small hands, she held a crude doll made of corn husks and yarn. "For you," the little girl said in Apache, extending the gift. Maria accepted it with a smile. "Thank you," she replied in the child's language. Talisi's face brightened at hearing her own tongue from the pale woman's lips. She reached out to touch Maria's rosary beads with curious fingers. "Prayer counters," Maria explained, though she knew the child wouldn't understand. "To speak with God." Dean. Talisi nodded seriously. "God." Maria felt a surge of unexpected emotion. This child understood more than she had presumed. Dean. She repeated, testing the Apache word for the divine on her tongue. It felt strange yet somehow right. After Talisi left, Maria held the cornhusk doll in one hand and her rosary in the other. Two worlds, coming together in her unlikely journey. 3 weeks into Maria's captivity, a scout returned to camp shortly before dawn, his horse lathered with sweat from hard riding. The man spoke urgently with Chief Nantai, gesturing toward the south. Within moments, the camp erupted into controlled chaos, women packing essential items, men checking weapons, children being quieted by mothers with worried eyes. Tejano appeared at Maria's shelter, his expression grim. "Bluecoats," he said tersely. "Soldiers from Fort Bowie. Searching for you." Maria's heart lurched at the news. Rescue, the very thing she had prayed for during those first terrifying days. Yet now, the prospect filled her with unexpected conflict. "How far?" she asked. 2 days' ride. They follow the river north. Tejano studied her face carefully. "They bring 2 men of God with them, and papers with your face drawn on them." Before she could respond, a young warrior approached, handing Tejano a folded piece of paper. "Found in trading post," the warrior explained in Apache. "White men asking questions showing this." Tejano unfolded the paper, a roughly printed notice with a sketched likeness of Maria in her nun's habit. The text described her capture by hostile Apaches and offered a reward for information leading to her recovery. At the bottom was a signature, Captain James Hendricks, 6th Cavalry. "Hendricks," Tejano said, his voice hardening. "The ghost killer. You know this man?" Maria asked. "He earned his name at Skeleton Cave," Tejano replied. 76 Apache, mostly women and children, dead in one morning. He collects scalps like others collect coins. Maria felt ill. She had heard whispers of the Skeleton Cave massacre at the mission, though Father Esteban had discouraged such inflammatory talk. The military's official report described it as a necessary action against hostile renegades. The Owadam at the mission told different stories. "What will happen?" she asked. "We move into the mountains. Now." Tahano gestured toward her few possessions. "Take only what you need." Maria gathered her journal, rosary, and the small wooden cross she had made. As she stepped outside, Chief Nantai approached, his face a mask of suspicion. "If she signals the bluecoats, we die," he said to Tahano in Apache, not bothering to hide his words from Maria, who now understood enough to grasp his meaning. "She will not," Tahano replied with confidence he could not possibly feel. Nantai turned to Maria, switching to halting Spanish. "You go with soldiers, many here die. You understand?" Maria looked around at the camp, at Inzuna directing younger women in packing food stores, at Talisi clinging to her mother's leg, at Nate carefully wrapping his medicine bundle. These people, whom she had once seen only as savage heathens, now had names, faces, stories she had begun to understand. "I will not signal the soldiers," she said firmly, meeting Nantai's gaze. "I will go with the tribe." Doubt flickered across the chief's weathered features. "But they are your people." Maria hesitated, surprised by her own certainty. "Because Captain Hendricks would kill you all, and I cannot have that on my soul." Her answer seemed to satisfy him, at least temporarily. With a curt nod, he moved away to oversee the warriors' preparations. The tribe departed within the hour, traveling in small groups to minimize their trail. Maria rode double with Inzuna on a paint mare, following a steep path into the mountains. The journey was grueling, narrow trails skirting sheer drops, tangled forests where branches tore at skin and clothing, streams to ford where the water ran swift and cold. By nightfall, Maria's body ached with exhaustion, but they continued pushing deeper into the mountains by moonlight. She marveled at the tribe's endurance, especially the elders and children who moved with determined silence despite the hardship. They made cold camp high on a ridge, no fires permitted that might betray their location. Huddled beneath a shared blanket with Inzuna and Nasja, Maria listened to the night sounds of the wilderness, so different from the familiar bells and prayers of the mission. "Why cavalry hunt so hard for one woman?" Nasja whispered, her breath forming small clouds in the chill mountain air. "I represent the church," Maria replied, searching for words Nasja would understand. "And the soldiers need to show they protect the settlements." By killing Apache, Inzuna added bitterly. "Not all soldiers are like Captain Hendricks," Maria said, though even as she spoke, she wondered if that was true. Her knowledge of the military came largely from the officers who occasionally attended mass at the mission, men who seemed honorable enough in their pressed uniforms and polite manners. But what were they like in the field when facing those they considered enemies? Dawn found them moving again, higher into the mountains. From their elevated path, Tahano pointed out a distant dust cloud in the valley below. Cavalry on the move, following their trail. "They are persistent," he observed. "You must be important to them." "Or you are," Maria countered. "Perhaps they use me as the reason to pursue what they already wanted, your band eliminated." Tahano gave her a measured look. "You begin to understand white man's politics." By midday, Maria developed a hacking cough, her lungs struggling with the thin mountain air and the pace of travel. By evening, fever flushed her cheeks. When they finally made camp in a protected canyon, she collapsed onto her sleeping mat, shivering despite the mild night. Nate examined her with concern, pressing gnarled fingers to her forehead and throat. "Mountain sickness," he diagnosed, preparing a tea of herbs and pine needles. "Strong for lowland woman." Through her fevered haze, Maria was aware of Tahano sitting beside her through the night, replacing cold compresses on her forehead, helping her sip Nate's bitter tea. Once, when the fever peaked, she grasped his hand. "If I die," she whispered, "tell Father Esteban I found another path to God." "You will not die," Tahano replied firmly. "Not when we have only begun to understand your medicine." In her journal later, when the fever had passed enough for her to write with trembling hands, Maria noted, "*The cavalry searches for me, led by a man known for brutality against these people. I chose to flee with the tribe rather than seek rescue." This decision would shock those at the mission, yet I cannot in good conscience deliver these people to slaughter. Have I betrayed my own kind, or found a deeper loyalty to humanity itself? The line between captor and protector blurs with each passing day. A full moon had passed since Maria's capture. Her fever broke after 3 difficult days in the mountain encampment, leaving her weakened but alive. The tribe had settled into a hidden valley high in the mountains, a place known to them from ancestral migrations, with a small spring feeding a series of pools and enough game to supplement their dwindling supplies. On the morning marking her 30th day among the Apache, Maria awoke to find Tejano waiting outside her shelter. "Today you are strong enough," he said, offering no further explanation. "Come." Curious, Maria followed him through the camp and up a narrow trail that wound through pine trees. Nate joined them, carrying his medicine pouch and a small clay pot of what appeared to be red ochre. They climbed in silence for nearly an hour before reaching a rock face partially hidden by overgrown junipers. Tejano pushed aside the branches to reveal the dark mouth of a cave. "Few know of this place," he said. "It belongs to the old ones." Maria hesitated at the entrance. "What is inside?" "Stories," Nate replied cryptically. "And perhaps answers." Tejano lit a torch of pitch-soaked pine, and they entered the cave. The passage narrowed before opening into a chamber tall enough to stand in. As the torchlight filled the space, Maria gasped. The walls were covered with paintings, hundreds of ochre, white, and black figures flowing across the stone like a visual narrative. "The ancestors left these," Nate explained, his voice hushed with reverence. "Before Apache, before Spanish, before all who walk now." Maria moved closer, studying the ancient art. She recognized human figures, animals, geometric patterns that might represent stars or seasons. Some images clearly told stories, hunting parties, ceremonial gatherings, battles with enemy tribes. "How old?" she asked, awed by the preservation of the colors. "Older than counting," Nate replied. Tejano directed the torch toward a particular section of wall. "Here," he said. "This is why we brought you." Maria studied the indicated panel. It showed a series of figures in what appeared to be a narrative sequence. First, a group of people suffering, thin stick figures with heads bowed, surrounded by what might be empty food baskets and dry water holes. Next, a figure falling from the sky or perhaps a mountain. A figure painted in white, unlike the red ochre used for the tribal members. Most striking was the third scene. The white figure standing with arms outstretched, with what appeared to be rain falling around it and plants growing from the ground. Tribal figures danced in a circle around the white being. "You see?" Tejano asked, watching her face closely. Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's coolness. "It looks like a pale one who brings rain after great suffering," Nate finished for her. "A story passed down for generations. A prophecy." Maria stepped back, shaking her head. "No. This is coincidence. I have no power to bring rain." "Yet you came to us when the drought was worst," Tejano countered. "A woman from beyond our lands, with healing in her hands." "I'm a simple nun," Maria insisted. "Not whatever this painting shows." Nate moved to another section of wall, gesturing for them to follow. "There is more." This panel showed the white figure teaching tribal members, apparent from the gestures of the painted arms. Another scene depicted the white figure combining what appeared to be tribal medicine symbols with strange markings that, to Maria's eye, resembled crude crosses. "The story tells of one who bridges 2 worlds," Nate explained. "Who brings new medicine by combining old ways with those from beyond." Maria stared at the paintings, her mind racing. "When were these made?" "The oldest were painted when the great mountains to the north still held ice year-round," Nate replied. "These," he indicated the panels they were examining, "are younger, but still from long before the Spanish came with their horses and metal." "So this can't be about me," Maria reasoned. "It must refer to someone else, someone who came before." Tejano's expression remained steady. "Or someone who was foretold." They spent hours in the cave, with Nate translating the visual language of the pictographs. Some told of great floods, others of times when stars fell from the sky. There were battles, migrations, celebrations of abundant harvests. Our history is here, Tahano said. Not in books like your people, but in images that speak across time. As they prepared to leave, Nate approached a blank section of wall. Dipping his finger in the clay pot he carried, he began to add a new image, a simple figure in white ochre, wearing what appeared to be a cross at its neck. "What are you doing?" Maria asked. Adding to the story, the old medicine man replied, "As each generation must." Outside, the afternoon sun momentarily blinded Maria after the cave's darkness. As her eyes adjusted, she looked out over the valley below, seeing the encampment as a tiny collection of shelters in the vast wilderness. How strange that these few dozen people, struggling to survive, carried within them stories and prophecies spanning countless generations. "I am not what you think," she said finally. "Not a chosen one or prophet." "Perhaps not," Tahano conceded. "But neither are you simply what you believed yourself to be." That night, Maria dreamed of the cave paintings coming to life, flowing across stone like water. In her dream, she stood before the white figure with outstretched arms, only to realize she was looking at her own reflection. She wrote in her journal, "Today I was shown ancient paintings that Tahano and Nate believe foretell my coming. The rational part of me rejects such superstition, yet I cannot deny the strange path that brought me here or the connections forming that once seemed impossible. These people interpret the world through stories and symbols rather than doctrine and scripture, yet their faith in the meaning of signs is no less powerful than our devotion to the cross. What if both are simply different languages speaking of the same divine mysteries? I came to the frontier to bring God to those who knew him not. Is it possible that God was already here, speaking in ways I hadn't learned to hear? The small spring in the mountain valley provided precious water, but not enough to support the tribe's needs for long. Each day, women carried water in gourds and skin bags, careful not to waste a single drop. Each day, the spring's flow seemed to diminish slightly, causing worried glances and whispered concerns. 5 weeks into her captivity, Maria stood by the spring, watching Nazca and other women fill their containers. The sight triggered a memory of the mission's garden, where Father Esteban had implemented irrigation techniques learned from the Spanish settlements in Mexico. "May I try something?" Maria asked Inzuna, who supervised the water collection. The elder woman raised an eyebrow but nodded. "What do you need?" "Digging sticks, clay to seal stones, and helpers," Maria replied. Word of Maria's project spread quickly through the camp. Soon, she had several curious helpers, including Talisi, who followed her every move with bright-eyed attention. Using gestures and her growing Apache vocabulary, Maria explained her plan to create a series of small retention basins that would collect and hold water, allowing it to be used more efficiently. At the mission, she explained to Tahano, who had come to observe, "We built similar systems to water crops during dry seasons. The basins let water settle and don't waste drops to the ground." The first basin took shape by midday, a shallow depression lined with flat stones, the cracks sealed with clay mixed with pine resin. From there, Maria showed them how to channel overflow into a second basin, and from there to a third. "Now we wait," she said, directing the flow from the spring into her creation. By evening, the system had captured enough water to fill several additional gourds, water that would have otherwise seeped into the ground. The tribe gathered to see the results, murmurs of approval spreading through the crowd. "Simple but clever," Chief Nantai acknowledged, inspecting the basins. "Like the old ways of the people who went before." Maria recognized the reference to the ancient Hohokam, whose canal systems had once irrigated vast areas of the desert. The Spanish missionaries had marveled at the remnants of these sophisticated waterworks. "Yes," she agreed. They understood water's value. Over the next 3 days, the basins were refined and expanded. Maria showed the tribe how to create covered storage to prevent evaporation and how to use filtered sand to keep the water clean. Women who had been skeptical now sought her input, bringing suggestions of their own that improved upon her initial design. Nate contributed knowledge of which clay deposits would hold best, while Tahano organized teams to quarry suitable flat stones from a nearby ridge. Even Chief Nantai participated, demonstrating a method of sealing joints with pitch that his grandfather had taught him. On the fourth morning, Maria awoke to excited voices. Hurrying from her shelter, she found the tribe gathered around something in the distance. Following their gaze, she saw dark clouds building over the western peaks, the first substantial cloud formation in months. "Friend, clouds," Tahano said, coming to stand beside her. "Perhaps your water-catching basins have pleased the sky spirits." Maria smiled at the suggestion but didn't contradict him. Instead, she found herself joining in when Nach began a soft chant, his aged voice carrying the prayer for rain that had gone unanswered for so long. The clouds built throughout the morning, dark and heavy with promise. By mid-afternoon, distant thunder echoed through the valley. The tribe's activities took on a festive air, preparations for rain that might actually come. "We should prepare more basins," Maria suggested to Tahano. "If it rains hard, we should capture as much as possible." He nodded, impressed by her practicality. "You think like Apache now. Never waste what the sky gives." Working quickly, the tribe constructed additional catch basins at Maria's direction, positioning them to collect runoff from the surrounding slopes. Children gathered clean stones for filtration, while women prepared storage containers. It became a community effort, punctuated by glances at the approaching storm. As sunset neared, the first fat raindrops fell, hesitant at first, then steadier. The tribe emerged from their shelters, faces turned upward in silent gratitude. Talisi grabbed Maria's hand, pulling her out into the rain with childish delight. "You brought the rain," the little girl said in Apache, her face shining with absolute conviction. "No," Maria replied gently. *Dean brings rain. God brings rain. "But you showed us how to keep it," Tahano said, joining them in the strengthening shower. "That is medicine too." The rainfall lasted through the night. Not a deluge, but a steady, soaking rain that filled their basins to overflowing. By morning, the small spring ran stronger, and tiny green shoots had appeared in soil that had seemed hopelessly barren the day before. Chief Nantai found Maria inspecting the basins as dawn broke. For once, his perpetual frown had softened. "The rain came on the night of the new moon," he observed. "The deadline for your life has passed, and you have proven your worth." Maria hadn't realized the significance of the date. The ultimatum set at her capture, to prove her value by the next full moon, had indeed expired with last night's new moon. "Does this mean I am no longer a captive?" she asked. Nantai considered this. "You are no longer prisoner," he said carefully. "But where would you go? The bluecoats still hunt. The desert still kills those who don't know its ways." The question lingered with Maria throughout the day as she helped empty and clean the basins, preparing them for the next rainfall. Where would she go? The mission seemed impossibly distant now, not just in miles but in her own transformation. The woman who had been captured weeks ago no longer existed. In her journal that night she wrote, "The rain came, coinciding with my water-catching basins. The tribe sees divine intervention. I see fortunate timing. Yet I find myself thanking God with the same fervor as they thank their spirits. We have created a system combining mission techniques with tribal knowledge, and it works better than either alone. Perhaps there is a lesson in that different traditions can flow together to create something new and life-giving. The basins themselves seem a metaphor for my journey, catching and holding precious experiences from two worlds. The rain brought renewal to the mountain valley, but also challenges. 2 children developed coughs from sleeping in damp conditions. An elder slipped on wet stones, wrenching his knee. A young hunter returned with a festering wound from a mistimed knife stroke while skinning a deer. 7 weeks into her life with the tribe, Maria found herself working alongside Nach more frequently, their healing practices gradually intertwining. The old medicine man taught her which plants gained potency after rainfall, showing her how to identify subtle differences between similar-looking leaves. "This one heals," he would say, pointing to a particular herb. "This one that looks the same kills." The spirits placed them side by side as a test of wisdom. In return, Maria shared nursing techniques learned from Sister Agnes, how to clean wounds with boiled water, how to set bones straight, how to recognize the early signs of infection. Together, they developed poultices that combined nature's herbal knowledge with Maria's understanding of wound care. One evening, as they treated a young woman's infected tooth, Maria absently began reciting a prayer to Saint Apollonia, patron saint of dental ailments. Nate listened attentively to the Latin words. "Your prayer has power," he observed after the patient had left. "I felt it working with my medicine song." Rather than contradicting him about the theological implications, Maria considered the possibility. "Perhaps prayers are a form of medicine too," she suggested. "They focus the mind and spirit on healing." Nate nodded thoughtfully. "The words matter less than the intention behind them. Your God and our spirits may listen with the same ears." The idea took root, growing alongside the valley's renewed vegetation. Maria began to carry both her rosary and small pouches of medicinal herbs, her fingers moving from beads to plants as the situation required. She learned Nature's healing songs, their melodies strangely compatible with the Gregorian chants of her religious training. A week later, a hunting party returned carrying a young warrior named Tarak who had fallen from a ridge, his body bruised and one arm clearly broken. As the tribe gathered anxiously, Nate and Maria worked in seamless cooperation, she setting the bone while he prepared pain-relieving herbs, both murmuring prayers in their respective traditions. Watching them work, Tahano saw something remarkable taking shape. The pale woman no longer hesitated to use Apache medicine, while the old shaman incorporated her methods without reservation. Something new was emerging from their collaboration, neither purely Christian nor purely Apache, but a third path that drew strength from both. After the wounded hunter was stabilized, Maria returned to her shelter to find a small bundle outside the entrance. Unwrapping the deerskin covering, she discovered a beautifully crafted medicine bundle, a small leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork and containing compartments for various healing items. Some spaces already held small packets of herbs, others remained empty, waiting for her additions. "Inzuna made it for you," Tahano explained, appearing quietly beside her. "She says you are becoming a true healer of the people." Maria ran her fingers over the craftsmanship, touched by the gift's significance. "I know so little compared to Nate." "You bring different medicine," Tahano replied. "Together, you make something stronger than either alone." That night, Maria carefully arranged her healing supplies in the new medicine bundle. She placed dried herbs in the designated compartments, but also tucked her wooden cross and a small vial of water she had blessed herself into the central pocket. The combination felt right in a way she couldn't articulate. In her journal, she wrote, "I have been given a medicine bundle, a sacred thing among these people. I find myself filling it with both Apache healing materials and symbols of my faith. Is this sacrilege or synthesis? I no longer know where the boundaries lie between my old beliefs and new understandings. The prayers I offer while healing still rise to God, but they now contain words from the Apache tongue alongside Latin phrases. I wonder if God hears them differently. I wonder if he hears them better." The next morning, Maria was called to help a woman struggling with a difficult birth. 4 hours, she worked with Inzuna and 2 other tribal midwives, applying both the techniques she had learned at the mission hospital and the birthing wisdom of the Apache women. When the baby finally emerged, a healthy boy with strong lungs, Maria found herself joining in the women's song of welcome without hesitation. Later, as she cleansed her hands in the stream, Chief Nantai approached, his usual stern expressions softened by something resembling respect. "The mother and child live because of your help," he acknowledged. "Your medicine grows strong among us." "It is not just my medicine," Maria replied carefully. "It is what we create together." Nantai studied her face. "When you first came, I saw only an enemy, a sacrifice to appease angry spirits. Now I see something else." "What do you see?" Maria asked. "A bridge," he answered after a thoughtful pause, "between worlds that have only known how to fight each other." As he walked away, Maria touched the medicine bundle now hanging at her waist alongside her rosary. A bridge between worlds, the image resonated within her. She had come to these lands intending to convert the heathens, to replace their spiritual understanding with her own. Instead, she found herself standing between traditions, drawing wisdom from both shores. That evening, when a young boy came to her with a splinter in his foot, Maria found herself instinctively combining approaches. She cleaned the wound with boiled water as Sister Agnes had taught, applied a salve of juniper and pine resin as Nate had shown her, wrapped the foot in clean cloth from her dwindling supply of habit material, and finished by making the sign of the cross while singing a soft Apache healing melody. The boy watched her with solemn eyes. "2 medicines," he said in Apache. "Yes," Maria agreed, smiling. "2 medicines, 1 healing." As the boy limped away, Tahano appeared from the shadows where he had been observing. "You have found your path," he said simply. "I'm not sure what my path is anymore," Maria admitted. "That," Tahano replied, "is how you know you're on the right one." 2 months after her capture, Maria's integration into tribal life had progressed to where most days she forgot she had ever been a captive. She rose with the sun for morning prayers, a blend of her familiar devotions and the Apache greeting to Father Sunday. She worked alongside the women gathering food, tending to the sick, and teaching the children. At night, she joined the community circle, listening to stories and gradually adding her own from the Bible, translated into concepts the Apache could understand. The peace of this new existence shattered at dawn when a hunting party returned at full gallop, dust rising behind their horses. The lead rider, a young warrior named Cato, leapt from his mount before it had fully stopped. "Bluecoats," he reported breathlessly to the gathering crowd. "Many. In the valley below 3 Sisters Rocks." The words rippled through the camp like a stone dropped in still water. Women began quietly gathering essentials, children were hushed, warriors checked weapons. They had prepared for this possibility since reaching the mountain valley. Tahano found Maria sorting medicinal herbs with Nate. "The soldiers have found our general location," he told her without preamble. "Not the camp yet, but they searched the canyons." "How many?" Maria asked, her hands automatically securing her medicine bundle. Cato counted 26 riders. "And they have an Apache scout with them." The implication hung in the air. Someone had guided the cavalry to their remote hiding place, someone familiar with tribal movements. Chief Nantai called a council meeting immediately. Maria, now accepted as a healer, was permitted to attend. She sat beside Nate as warriors reported what they had observed. "They carry long glass eyes," Cato explained, mimicking the use of a telescope. "They study the mountains from the ridges." Nantai's face remained impassive, but Maria noticed a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. As the council debated options, flee higher into the mountains, separate into smaller groups, stand and fight, Nantai's contributions seemed strangely hesitant. The council dispersed with a decision to send scouts to monitor the cavalry's movements while preparing for possible evacuation. As the group broke up, Maria noticed Nantai slip away toward a secluded part of the camp. Something in his furtive manner triggered her suspicion. Following at a distance, she watched as the chief retrieved something from beneath a rock near the edge of camp, a small object that glinted in the sunlight. When he moved toward the forest, Maria followed, her moccasins silent on the pine needle floor. A quarter-mile from camp, Nantai stopped in a small clearing. From his pouch, he removed the object Maria had glimpsed, a silver cavalry whistle on a chain. He raised it to his lips, then hesitated, seeming to reconsider. Maria stepped on a dry branch. The crack echoed through the trees. Nantai spun, the whistle disappearing into his fist. His eyes widened at the sight of Maria, then narrowed dangerously. "Why do you follow me, woman?" he demanded. Maria stood her ground. "What are you doing with a cavalry whistle, Chief Nantai?" His hand moved to the knife at his belt. "Things you don't understand." "I understand betrayal," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You've been communicating with Captain Hendricks." The accusation hung between them. For a moment, Maria thought he might deny it or perhaps attack her. Instead, his shoulders sagged slightly. "You know nothing of leadership," he said bitterly. "Of watching children starve. Of seeing our land stolen, water holes poisoned. So you lead the cavalry to your own people?" Maria asked incredulously. I made a deal, Nantai replied. Information for reservation land with water rights. Protection for those who surrender. The old ways are dying, woman. I try to save what can be saved. By delivering your tribe to a man known for massacring Apache women and children? Her head. Captain Hendricks will not honor any deal. Not all bluecoats are the same, Nantai argued. Their lieutenant gave his word. Their word to Apache means nothing, Maria countered. I've seen how treaties are broken before the ink dries. A twig snapped behind her. Maria turned to find Tahano standing at the edge of the clearing, bow half-drawn. His eyes moved from Maria to the chief, to the silver whistle now visible in Nantai's hand. I heard, he said simply, his voice deadly quiet. Nantai's expression hardened. You've lived among whites. You know we cannot win against their numbers, their weapons. So you choose to crawl to them instead? Tahano's voice remained controlled, but Maria could sense the rage beneath his words. To betray your own blood? I choose survival, Nantai snapped. The drought weakens us. The army surrounds us. What future do you see, dreamer? Not one purchased with the blood of our people, Tahano replied. For a tense moment, Maria thought the men would fight. Then Nantai straightened, chief once more despite his exposed treachery. The council will decide, he said with forced dignity. Let them choose between death in the mountains and life on the reservation. The council will indeed decide, Tahano agreed coldly. About your betrayal as well as our path forward. As they returned to camp, Maria walking between the two men, she observed a scout on a distant ridge using a captured telescope, the long glass eye Cato had mentioned. The instrument, brass gleaming in the sun, represented everything the tribe now faced, the encroaching outside world, impossible to ignore or escape. In her journal that night, Maria wrote, the cavalry has found us, guided by Chief Nantai's secret communication. The tribe faces impossible choices, fight, flee, or surrender to uncertain promises. I find myself in an unimaginable position, a white woman who now fears the arrival of white soldiers. Where does my loyalty belong? To my original people or those who have become my community? The question tears at me like two horses pulling in opposite directions. Tonight I prayed for guidance, first with my rosary, then with Nature's prayer feather. I am no longer certain which reaches higher, but I pray at least one finds God's ear. The tribal council convened at midnight, illuminated only by the small central fire. Nantai stood accused, the cavalry whistle now displayed as evidence of his communication with the bluecoats. His face remained proud despite the murmurs of anger rippling through the gathered tribe. I sought terms that would allow us to live, he declared, meeting the accusing stares. The reservation at San Carlos has water. The army promises food. Promises written on wind, an elder scoffed. My brother believed such words at Camp Grant. His scalp now hangs in a soldier's tent. The debate raged for hours. Maria sat quietly beside Inzuna, listening as the tribe weighed impossible options. Fight against superior numbers and weapons. Flee deeper into increasingly inhospitable mountains. Or trust the promises of those who had repeatedly broken their word. What of the pale woman? Someone finally asked. She is one of them. Let her return, tell them we mean no harm. All eyes turned to Maria. In the flickering firelight, she saw fear, hope, suspicion, and something else that caught in her throat. Some among them, especially the women and children she had healed, looked at her with trust. I am asked to speak, she said, rising slowly. But first I must know, am I still seen as captive, or as one of the people? Silence fell. It was Nate who finally answered. You came as captive, the old medicine man said. You remained by choice when the soldiers first searched. You have healed our sick, improved our water, learned our ways. He touched the medicine bundle at her waist. Your spirit walks with ours now. Murmurs of agreement rose from many, though not all. Then I will speak as one who stands between worlds, Maria continued. I know the bluecoats. I know Captain Hendricks. His promises are hollow. He seeks glory through Apache blood. She turned to Nantai. Any deal you made will die the moment your people are vulnerable. You cannot know this, Nantai challenged. I know the talk at the mission, Maria countered. I've heard officers speak when they thought no women were listening. Hendrix boasts of his kills. He collects trophies from the dead. The council erupted in angry shouts until Tahano raised his hand for silence. What would you have us do, Maria? He asked. You know both worlds. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. This woman who had once been their captive was now being asked to help determine their fate. Maria felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Neither surrender nor direct battle, she said finally. But I may be able to divert them, to buy time for the tribe to move to safer ground. How? Several voices asked at once. By returning to them, Maria explained, her plan forming as she spoke. I will tell them I escaped, that I was held far from here. I will lead them in the wrong direction. Shocked silence followed her proposal. Tahano's face revealed a complex mixture of admiration and what might have been personal loss. You would lie to your own people? To your church? He asked quietly. Maria thought of Father Esteban, of the sisters at the mission, of her vows of honesty and obedience. Then she looked at Talisi clutching her mother's hand, at the elders whose wisdom had taught her to survive, at the women who had accepted her into their daily lives. I would protect innocent lives, she answered firmly. God will understand that choice, even if the army does not. The council debated her proposal into the early morning hours. Some distrusted her willingness to return to the whites. Others feared she would reveal their location once reunited with her kind. But as dawn approached, a consensus emerged. It was their best hope. As the council dispersed, Maria returned to her shelter to prepare. She uncovered her original habit, carefully folded beneath her sleeping mat. The black wool was ragged, dusty from disuse, yet it represented the life she had known before. With trembling hands, she exchanged her Apache clothing for the familiar garment. The transformation was jarring. Looking down at herself in the nun's habit, Maria felt like an actress donning a costume for a role she had once played but could no longer fully embody. She secured her rosary beads openly at her waist but tucked her medicine bundle beneath the habit, close to her heart, a physical representation of her divided self. Outside, she found Tahano waiting. His eyes took in her changed appearance, lingering on the cross at her neck. You look as you did when you first came to us, he observed. A stranger. Only on the outside, Maria replied softly. You truly returned to us, he asked, the question holding layers of meaning beyond the immediate mission. I will do everything in my power, she promised. But the path ahead is uncertain. Like all worthy paths, Tahano replied. He hesitated, then reached out to touch her cheek briefly, the first such gesture between them. Be careful, Maria of two worlds. As she prepared to leave, various members of the tribe approached with farewell gestures. Inzuna pressed a small leather pouch of dried berries into her hand. For strength, the old woman explained. Nache offered a blessing, touching her forehead with sacred pollen. Talisi simply hugged her legs, her small face solemn with the gravity of the moment. Chief Nantai, now under guard but still accorded the respect of his position, approached last. I sought the same end as you, he said quietly. Safety for our people. Through different means, Maria acknowledged. I pray one of our paths succeeds. She departed at mid-morning, wearing her habit, carrying only her rosary visibly and a small pack with essentials. A scout would shadow her until she reached the cavalry's perimeter, then return to guide the tribe to a new hiding place. As Maria descended from the mountain valley that had become her home, she mentally rehearsed her story. Escape during the night. Captors camped far to the north. Wandering lost for days. Every word a lie that might save dozens of lives. In her journal, hastily written before departing and left hidden in her shelter, she had penned, *I leave today wearing my habit but carrying Apache medicine against my heart. I go to deceive men of my own race to protect those who once held me captive but now hold my loyalty. The woman who entered this valley as Sister Maria no longer exists. Who exactly leaves in her place, I cannot fully say. I only know that my conscience and my God guide me toward this choice, whatever the mission or the church might say of it. May Christ who protected the vulnerable forgive my deception in service of the same cause. Maria descended the mountain path carefully, each step taking her further from the tribe and closer to her former world. The fabric of her habit chafed against skin now accustomed to softer buckskin. The shoes she had recovered from her original possessions pinched her feet, which had grown accustomed to moccasins that moved with the earth rather than against it. By mid-afternoon, she spotted cavalry scouts in the distance, their blue uniforms stark against the desert landscape. Taking a deep breath, Maria stepped into an open area where they would easily see her. She raised her arms, the black habit making her unmistakable against the tawny hillside. "Hello," she called out, her voice cracking from tension. "Please help me." The reaction was immediate. The scouts wheeled their horses, one staying to watch her while the other galloped toward the main camp. Within minutes, a larger contingent approached, rifles ready, faces wary beneath dusty campaign hats. "I am Sister Maria Catalina de la Cruz," she called out, making the sign of the cross. "From Mission San Xavier del Bac." A young lieutenant urged his horse forward, disbelief evident on his sunburned face. "Sister? We've been searching for you for months." "Thanks be to God you found me," Maria replied, adding a deliberate tremble to her voice. "I escaped 3 nights ago. I've been walking since, trying to find help." The lieutenant dismounted, approaching cautiously. "Are you injured, sister? Did they harm you?" Maria understood the unspoken question. "I am unharmed, Lieutenant. God protected me from the worst fates." Relief washed over the young officer's face. He offered her his canteen, which she accepted with convincing eagerness, though she had drank her fill before leaving the tribe's spring. "Lieutenant Ellis Cooper, 6th Cavalry," he introduced himself. "Captain Hendricks will want to see you immediately." Maria allowed herself to be helped onto a spare horse and escorted to the main cavalry camp. As they rode, she took careful note of their numbers, weapons, and demeanor. 28 soldiers including officers, all looking trail-worn but determined. 2 Apache scouts in uneasy alliance with the Bluecoats. Supplies for perhaps 2 more weeks of campaign. The camp came into view, a collection of military tents arranged in orderly rows, horses picketed nearby, cooking fires sending thin columns of smoke into the afternoon sky. As they approached, soldiers emerged from tents and gathered, staring in amazement at the black-robed figure among the returning patrol. A tall man with a full mustache and captain's bars strode from the command tent. Captain James Hendricks had the weathered face of a career frontier officer, with cold eyes that assessed Maria with calculation rather than relief. "The missing nun," he said, his voice carrying the rasp of whiskey and trail dust. "Quite a miracle, sister, finding you alive after all this time." "God guides all things, Captain," Maria replied, lowering her eyes in a gesture of humility that also hid their expression. In the command tent, seated on a camp stool with a blessed cup of coffee, her first in months, Maria recounted her prepared story. Captured during the raid. Being taken north toward the Mogollon Rim. Harsh treatment until a young warrior showed kindness. Escape during a night of celebration when the warriors drank tiswin, the fermented corn alcohol. "I walked south, following the stars as the mission fathers taught us," she explained. "I hid during the day and traveled at night." Captain Hendricks studied her throughout the tale, his eyes narrow with suspicion. "You look remarkably well-fed for a woman wandering the desert, sister." "I found berries, and once a nest of eggs," Maria replied smoothly. "God provides for his servants." "Indeed." The captain stroked his mustache. "And these Apache who held you, you could lead us to their camp?" Maria had prepared for this question. They camped near 3 tall rock spires north of a dry riverbed. "But Captain, they spoke of moving soon, following game herds eastward." Lieutenant Cooper spread a map on the camp table. "Show us, sister." With deliberate hesitation, Maria indicated a location far from the tribe's actual position, a plausible site with water access but in the opposite direction from their mountain valley. "We'll move at first light," Hendricks decided. "Cooper, see that the sister is given proper accommodation. Post a guard, for her protection. As Lieutenant Cooper escorted her to a small tent, Maria noticed an eagle feather floating down from the sky, landing directly in her path. She stopped to pick it up, remembering Nature's teaching that eagle feathers were sacred messengers. "Just a feather, sister," Cooper said with an indulgent smile. "Plenty of eagles in these mountains." "Yes, of course," Maria replied, tucking the feather into her sleeve. "Merely a pretty thing." That evening, as the camp settled for the night, Maria sat alone in her tent, the feather in her hand, her mind racing with observations and plans. The guard posted outside her tent confirmed her suspicions. Hendricks didn't fully trust her story. She would need to be vigilant. Lieutenant Cooper proved a valuable source of information, visiting to check on her comfort and inadvertently revealing details about their mission. The cavalry had orders to pacify the hostiles by any means necessary. Translated from military euphemism, Maria understood this meant they were authorized to kill. "We've been tracking this particular band for weeks," Cooper explained. "Intelligence suggests they're led by a troublemaker named Tejano, known to have lived among whites before turning renegade." Maria kept her expression neutral despite the jolt of hearing Tejano's name. "This leader, he was not among those who held me." "Different band, perhaps," Cooper suggested. "Though these Apache are known to split and rejoin depending on conditions." When Cooper left, Maria carefully extracted her medicine bundle from its hiding place beneath her habit. Among its contents was a small pouch of herbs Nate had given her for strength and clarity of mind. She brewed these in hot water brought for tea, drinking the bitter mixture while formulating her next steps. The eagle feather, she decided, was both warning and blessing. Tomorrow she would guide the cavalry east, away from the tribe's actual location and into terrain she knew from Tejano's teachings would be difficult for horses. Her deception would buy precious time for the tribe to relocate to their fallback position deeper in the mountains. As night fell completely, Maria heard the sentries changing guard. Through the tent canvas, shadows moved in the firelight. One shadow paused near her tent, taller than the others, straight-backed with a distinctive profile. Captain Hendricks, observing her tent personally. Maria clutched the eagle feather, whispering a prayer that combined Latin phrases with Apache words, a bridge between worlds even in her most private moments. Outside, the captain's shadow lingered a moment longer before moving away into the darkness. Maria waited until the midnight hour, when the camp fell into its deepest silence. The guard outside her tent had changed twice since nightfall. The current sentry, a young private whose breathing had settled into the steady rhythm of a man fighting sleep. Through a small gap in the tent flap, she watched his silhouette slump slightly against his rifle. Earlier, during supper in the officers' mess, she had carefully gathered information while maintaining her role as the grateful rescued nun. Captain Hendricks, loosened by whiskey, had revealed more than he intended about his true objectives. "We'll escort you to safety first, of course, sister," he had said, his courteous words belied by the cold calculation in his eyes. "Then return to deal with these savages permanently. The territory has had enough of Apache problems." "Surely some accommodation can be reached," Maria had suggested gently. "At the mission, we found many of the native people responsive to Christian teaching." Hendricks had laughed, a sound without humor. "The only good Apache is one safely on the reservation or under the ground. Present company accepted, of course," he added with a nod to the two scouts eating separately near the cook fire. Now, with his words echoing in her mind, Maria gathered her few possessions. She left her outer habit folded neatly on the cot but kept the lighter underdress, tearing it shorter for easier movement. Her rosary remained at her waist, alongside her medicine bundle now worn openly. The eagle feather she secured in her hair, recalling Nature's teaching that it would help her move unseen. When the sentry's chin finally dropped to his chest, Maria slipped silently from the rear of the tent where she had carefully loosened the stakes. Tejano's lessons in moving without sound served her well as she glided between shadows, avoiding the patrol pattern she had memorized earlier. The horse picket line presented the greatest challenge. A separate sentry stood guard there, more alert than her tent guard. Maria circled wide, using a small ridge as cover, and approached from the opposite direction. Drawing on Nature's teaching, she softly mimicked the call of a nighthawk, distinct enough to draw attention but common enough not to cause alarm. As the guard turned toward the sound, Maria darted to the nearest horse, the very mount she had ridden into camp. The animal recognized her scent and remained calm as she quickly bridled it, leaving the saddle behind for speed and silence. Leading the horse by its bridle, she retreated into the shadows of a dry wash before mounting. Once clear of the immediate camp perimeter, Maria urged the horse into a ground-covering trot, heading not toward the eastern direction she had indicated on the maps, but northwest, toward the tribe's actual position. The night was clear, stars providing enough light to navigate by, especially for eyes trained by Apache teachers to read the land. She rode through the night, pushing herself and the horse to their limits. By dawn, she had covered nearly 20 miles of difficult terrain, putting substantial distance between herself and the cavalry. Still, she knew they would discover her absence at first light. The hunt would begin immediately. As the first gray light touched the eastern horizon, Maria allowed the exhausted horse to rest briefly at a small seep spring. While the animal drank, she climbed a nearby rise to scan her back trail. No dust clouds yet, but the day was young. She pressed on as the sun rose, the temperature climbing rapidly. Her modified habit provided less protection than Apache clothing would have, and she felt the sun burning her exposed skin. The horse, a cavalry mount trained for endurance, maintained a steady pace despite its fatigue. Mid-morning brought her to a series of rocky ridges that Tejano had once shown her. A place where few whites go, he had explained. The rocks hold memories they cannot hear. Now she followed barely visible Apache trails through the maze-like formations, paths that would confuse any pursuing cavalry. Behind a particularly prominent rock formation, Maria found what she had hoped for, signs of the tribe's passage. Fresh tracks indicated perhaps a dozen individuals had moved through the area within the past day. She was on the right path. By noon, with the sun directly overhead, Maria spotted movement ahead, a lone figure watching from a high point. She recognized the silhouette immediately, Tejano, standing guard over the tribe's retreat. She raised her hand in greeting, relief washing through her exhausted body. Minutes later, they met on the trail, Tejano's face showing rare open emotion, surprise, relief, and something deeper that remained unspoken. "You escaped them," he said simply. "They plan to attack at dawn tomorrow," Maria replied without preamble. "Hendrix knows more than he should about your band specifically. He mentioned you by name." Tejano's expression darkened. "Nantai's betrayal runs deeper than we thought." "How far to the others?" Maria asked, dismounting on legs stiff from hours of riding. 3 miles, in the hidden canyon," Tejano replied, taking the horse's bridle. "They prepare for the journey to the high mountains, but it goes slowly with the elders and children." "They need to move faster," Maria urged. "Hendrix will realize my deception by midday. When he does, he'll be doubly dangerous." As they walked, leading the tired horse, Maria described the cavalry force in detail, their numbers, weapons, and the captain's explicit intentions. Tejano listened intently, his tactical mind assessing their options. "We cannot outrun them with the whole tribe," he concluded. "Some must continue to the high sanctuary. Others must delay the bluecoats." Maria understood the implication. A fighting retreat. Tejano nodded grimly. "I will lead it. We will draw them away from the others." "I'm coming with you," Maria stated, not a question but a declaration. Tejano studied her face, taking in the determination written there, the sun-reddened skin, the eagle feather still secured in her hair. "You have already risked much." "This is my fight too," she replied. "I cannot stand aside while Hendrix hunts people I've come to care for." She hesitated on the last words, layers of meaning hovering unspoken between them. They crested a rise, and the hidden canyon came into view below, a narrow, sheltered space where the remainder of the tribe had gathered. Even from a distance, Maria could see the activity as people packed their few belongings, prepared food for the journey, tended to children and elders. "My people," Tejano said softly. Maria followed his gaze, a lump forming in her throat. "My people too," she whispered, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Dawn broke with thunderheads building over the western mountains, unusual for the season but welcome for their plan. The tribe had separated during the night. Elders, children, and most women had departed for the high sanctuary, a hidden valley known only to tribal elders. The remaining warriors, just 14 strong, prepared for their dangerous task of diversion. Maria stood with them, no longer in her modified habit but dressed in Apache clothing, her face touched with earth pigments that would blend with the terrain. Around her neck hung both her wooden cross and a medicine pouch. At her waist, a water gourd and a knife Tahano had insisted she take. Remember, Tahano instructed the small band, we do not seek battle. We show ourselves, draw them away from the others' trail, then disappear into the canyons where their horses struggle. Nach, who had refused to leave despite his age, completed a blessing ceremony. As he touched sacred pollen to each warrior's forehead, he paused at Maria. You stand between worlds, the old medicine man said. Today, that is strength, not weakness. They moved out as the strange storm clouds continued gathering. Maria rode double with Nazca, the two women tasked with creating false trails while the warriors positioned themselves as decoys. The plan depended on precise timing and intimate knowledge of the landscape. By mid-morning, scouts reported the cavalry approaching from the south, earlier than expected. Hendrix had clearly discovered her deception and changed course immediately, pushing his men and horses hard. The confrontation would come sooner than planned, in terrain less favorable to the Apache strategy. We must adjust, Tahano decided, studying the approaching dust cloud. The narrow passage by Split Rock. We will lead them there. Maria knew the location, a constricted canyon where the walls rose steeply on both sides. The storm, she said, pointing to the darkening sky. If rain comes. Tahano nodded grimly. Flash flood. Dangerous for all, but they don't know the high paths. The small band moved quickly to their new positions. Maria and Nazca separated, creating multiple false trails to confuse the cavalry trackers. As Maria worked, scuffing dirt and planting misleading signs, the first fat raindrops began to fall, pattering on the dusty ground. From her vantage point on a ridge, Maria spotted the cavalry column, Hendrix at the lead, face set in grim determination, the two Apache scouts flanking him. The soldiers looked trail-worn but dangerous, rifles at the ready. They followed the false trails with growing frustration, splitting into smaller search parties as the deception took effect. The rain intensified suddenly, a desert downpour that reduced visibility and turned dust to mud. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed immediately by booming thunder. In the confusion, Tahano's warriors executed their plan, appearing briefly on ridgelines before vanishing, drawing soldiers deeper into the maze of canyons. Maria watched as Hendrix and a detachment of 6 men followed one such decoy directly towards Split Rock Canyon. The captain's face was a mask of rage, recognizing the deliberate misdirection but unable to resist pursuing the visible quarry. Above the canyon, Maria and Nazca exchanged glances. The rain now fell in sheets, and the normally dry stream bed below had begun to carry water, a trickle rapidly becoming a flow. Time to leave, Nazca urged. The water comes fast when it comes. But as they prepared to retreat to higher ground, Maria spotted Lieutenant Cooper's horse stumble on the slick terrain, throwing its rider hard against the canyon wall. The young officer lay motionless as the water in the canyon bottom rose ominously. Go, Maria told Nazca. I must help him. He is Bluecoat. Nazca protested. He is a man who will drown, Maria replied, already picking her way down a narrow game trail toward the injured lieutenant. The descent was treacherous, loose rocks sliding under her feet in the rain. By the time she reached Cooper, water swirled around her ankles, rising visibly with each passing minute. The lieutenant was unconscious, blood mixing with rainwater on his face. As Maria assessed his injuries, shouting erupted from further down the canyon. Captain Hendrix and his men had spotted her. The captain's voice carried over the storm's rumble. The nun! Seize her! 2 soldiers splashed toward her through the rising water. Behind them, Hendrix's face contorted with rage and betrayal at the sight of Maria in Apache dress. Take one more step and you all die. Maria shouted, her voice carrying an authority that stopped the soldiers in their tracks. "Look at the water! This canyon is about to flood." As if summoned by her words, a distant roaring sound reached them, the flash flood wave approaching from upstream. Maria pointed to a narrow ledge 10 feet up the canyon wall. "Get the lieutenant up there or you're all dead men." The immediate danger overrode Hendrix's fury. He ordered his men to help Cooper, while Maria directed them to the safest path up the slick rock face. As the water rose with frightening speed, soldiers scrambled for high ground, dragging the unconscious lieutenant with them. Maria climbed alongside, her Apache-trained feet finding purchase where the soldiers' boots slipped. When one young private lost his grip, she caught his wrist, her strength surprising both of them as she helped haul him to safety. They reached the ledge just as the full force of the flood hit, a churning wall of water, logs, and debris that would have killed anyone caught in its path. Pressed against the canyon wall, soldiers and Apache alike watched in awe as the normally dry canyon became a raging river in minutes. In the enforced proximity of the narrow ledge, Maria tended to Cooper's head wound, using both her Apache medicine bundle and prayers from her Catholic training. The soldiers watched in confused silence as this woman in native dress cleaned the wound with herbs, applied a poultice, and murmured Latin prayers over their officer. Captain Hendrix stood slightly apart, his expression unreadable as he observed her work. When Cooper finally regained consciousness, blinking up at Maria in confusion, the captain spoke. "You betrayed your own kind," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Chose savages over civilization." Maria continued her treatment without looking up. "I chose humanity over cruelty, Captain. Something you might consider. They're heathens. Enemies of everything you supposedly represent," Hendrix pressed. Now Maria did look up, her gaze steady. "Christ taught us to love our enemies, Captain. I found I could do better. I learned they were never enemies at all." The storm's fury began to abate, though the flood waters would take hours to recede. On the opposite canyon rim, Maria glimpsed movement, Tejano and several warriors watching the scene unfold, bows ready but holding their fire in this moment of strange truce. "They could kill us all now," Maria said quietly to Hendrix. "That they don't should tell you something about who the real savages are." Lieutenant Cooper, now fully conscious, studied Maria's face. "You never intended to return to the mission, did you, sister?" "I am no longer Sister Maria," she replied. "I stand between worlds now. Perhaps to build a bridge others might cross someday." A year had passed since the confrontation in Split Rock Canyon. Spring brought wildflowers blooming across the valley that now served as home to Tejano's people. The winter had been generous with snow, and the spring melt-filled streams and nourished crops planted in fields irrigated by an expanded version of Maria's water-catching system. Maria knelt beside a clay pot she had crafted using techniques that blended Apache methods with those she had learned from Owadam potters at the mission. The vessel, decorated with symbols from both cultures, held seeds for the coming planting, corn, beans, and squash from the Apache tradition, alongside wheat and fruit seeds from the mission gardens, traded through new, cautious alliances. Her hands, now deeply tanned and calloused from work, moved confidently as she sorted the seeds. At her throat hung a wooden cross, carved from desert ironwood and inlaid with turquoise in the Apache style, a wedding gift from Tejano, symbolizing the union of their spiritual paths as well as their lives. "The children are gathered," Nasja called from the edge of the field. "They wait for the story." Maria smiled, rising with one hand supporting the gentle swell of her belly. 5 months pregnant, she carried the physical embodiment of the bridge between worlds she had become. Near the central fire pit, 15 children sat in a semicircle, Apache children alongside 3 from a nearby Mexican settlement and 2 from a pioneer family that had established peaceful relations with the tribe. Once a week, these children gathered for what had become known as medicine stories, tales that combined biblical parables with Apache wisdom teachings. "Today," Maria began, settling carefully onto a woven mat, "we learn about the gift of rain." She spoke in a mixture of Apache, Spanish, and English, ensuring all the children could follow. As she told the story of Noah and the flood, she wove in the Apache creation story of the first rain, helping the children see the common threads of renewal, cleansing, and divine promise in both traditions. Tahano watched from the edge of the gathering, his face softened with an emotion that still surprised him after all these months. When Maria finished her story, he stepped forward with a small leather pouch. "Each of you takes one," he instructed, opening the pouch to reveal seed balls, clay, soil, and seeds formed into small spheres that would dissolve with the coming rains, planting wildflowers across the valley. As the children dispersed, each clutching their seed ball and chattering excitedly about where they would plant it, Inzuna approached Maria with a cup of herbal tea. "Good for the baby," the elder woman said, patting Maria's stomach affectionately. "Make strong boy." "Or girl," Maria replied with a smile, accepting the tea gratefully. "Boy," Inzuna insisted with the confidence of decades of midwifery. "Strong like father, wise like mother." The past year had brought remarkable changes. After the flash flood incident, Lieutenant Cooper had surprised everyone by becoming an advocate for the tribe. His report contradicted Captain Hendrix's version of events, describing Maria not as a traitor but as a brave intermediary who had saved his life using both Apache medicine and Christian faith. While Hendrix had been reassigned to a desk position far from Apache territory, Cooper had helped negotiate a small but official recognition of the tribe's right to remain in their valley, not a reservation, but a tacit acknowledgement of their claim to the land. In exchange, the tribe provided scouts for the army and agreed to help maintain peace with neighboring settlements. The mission, too, had undergone changes. Father Esteban, after receiving Maria's letter explaining her choice, had made the dangerous journey to visit her. Though initially shocked by her transformation, he had returned to San Xavier with new insights into Apache spirituality and a commitment to more respectful engagement with native traditions. Now, as afternoon sunlight bathed the valley in golden light, Maria heard the distant sound of the mission bell carried on the wind, a reminder of the world she had left, yet still connected to. The sound no longer filled her with conflict but with a sense of completion, as if the circle of her journey had found its proper shape. Tahano joined her as she stood, listening to the fading bell tones. "The traders bring news," he said. "Lieutenant Cooper comes next month to discuss the water rights." Maria nodded. "We'll be ready. The new irrigation system should impress him." "You have changed more than just our water sources," Tahano observed, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "Our whole people flow in new directions because of you." "Because of us," Maria corrected, covering his hand with hers. "One person cannot build a bridge alone. It needs anchors on both shores." As evening approached, the tribe gathered for the evening meal. No longer the desperate, hungry band that had once planned to sacrifice a captured nun, they had become a community adapting to changing times while maintaining their essential identity. Children played in the twilight. Elders told stories by the fire. Young couples, including a few mixed relationships between Apache and settlers, shared private smiles across the flames. And at the heart of it all, neither fully Apache nor fully European but something new and vital, Maria and Tahano sat side by side, their shadows merging as the fire flickered between worlds. In her journal, the final pages of the small book now filled with 2 years of extraordinary transformation, Maria wrote her last entry. The woman who left Seville for the American frontier believing she would bring God to the heathens now understands that God was always here, speaking in different tongues but with the same voice. The nun who was to be sacrificed instead became a bridge between worlds. My child will walk this bridge from birth, belonging fully to both shores and fearing neither. Is this what God intended all along? I believe it must be so. The greatest sacrifice was not of life but of certainty. The comfortable blindness of believing one's own path is the only true one. In losing that, I have gained everything. The morning light filtered through the tattered silk curtains of Villa Aurelia, casting muted patterns across a floor that had once gleamed with polished marble. Lady Cassia Valeria sat at her father's desk, turning a golden ring between her fingers. The Valerian eagle seal caught the light, its wings spread in eternal flight, the last physical reminder of all she had lost. 6 months had transformed Cassia's world beyond recognition. Once, The Villa Aurelia had bustled with life, scholars debating in the atrium, musicians playing in the courtyard, and the constant flow of political allies seeking her father's counsel. Senator Marcus Valerian had been respected throughout Rome for his integrity, his 3 sons following in his footsteps. Cassia, educated alongside her brothers in an unusual show of progressive thinking, had been destined for a strategic marriage to strengthen family alliances. Now, at 26, she sat alone in a house of ghosts. "My lady, you must eat something." Demetria, her elderly handmaiden, placed a small plate of bread and olives beside her. With Demetria, only the house steward Gallus and the cook Primus remained of what had once been a household of 30 slaves. Cassia nodded absently, her fingers still working the ring. "Has Senator Severus's man come again?" "Not today, my lady. But there are rumors in the market." Demetria hesitated, her weathered face creasing with worry. "They say he plans to petition the Senate for your property, claiming it as compensation for alleged damages caused by your father." The word tasted bitter. Her father and brothers, executed for treason on evidence so flimsy it would have been laughable had the consequences not been so devastating. Her mother, succumbing to grief within weeks, leaving Cassia to face Rome's cruelty alone. "Let him try," Cassia said, though they both knew her defiance was hollow. Without male advocates, her legal standing was precarious. Each day brought the villa closer to ruin as resources dwindled and maintenance was neglected. Rising from the desk, Cassia moved to the window overlooking what had once been immaculate gardens. Weeds now pushed between the stone pathways, and the fountain stood dry. Her eyes traced the boundary wall where a section had crumbled, leaving them vulnerable in more ways than one. "I will read in the library," she said, more from habit than interest. The scrolls of philosophy that had once brought her joy now served only to pass empty hours. The library, at least, remained as her father had left it. Cassia ran her fingers along the wooden cases housing hundreds of scrolls, texts on Stoic philosophy, Greek poetry, histories of the Republic, and legal treatises. Here, Senator Valerian had taught his children to value wisdom above wealth, principle above popularity. "What would you do, father?" she whispered to the empty room. "How would you fight when they've taken everything but these walls?" No answer came. Only the familiar silence that had become her constant companion. As evening fell, Cassia lit the oil lamps herself, another adjustment to her reduced circumstances. Settling onto a couch with one of Cicero's speeches, she tried to lose herself in the familiar rhythms of Latin rhetoric. Outside, a storm gathered, wind rattling the shutters like restless spirits. The sharp knock that came near midnight was so unexpected, so forceful, that Cassia startled, the scroll tumbling from her hands. No visitors came to Villa Aurelia anymore, certainly not at this hour. Fear, her familiar companion these past months, tightened around her heart. "My lady!" Gallus appeared at the library entrance, his face ashen. "There are men at the door." "Severus's men?" Her voice remained steady, a small victory. "No." Gallus swallowed hard. "I believe it's Maximus the Thracian." The name hung in the air between them. Even in her seclusion, Cassia had heard of Maximus, the giant gladiator who had won his freedom through combat so spectacular that songs were still composed about his victories. What business would such a man have at her door? "Tell him I am not receiving visitors," she said, though curiosity stirred beneath her caution. Gallus shifted uncomfortably. "My lady, he says he comes on a matter concerning your father." He was most insistent. Cassia's fingers found the eagle ring again, a habit when she needed strength. Her father had known many people from all stations of life, but a gladiator? It seemed impossible. And yet, in a world that had already shattered all expectations, perhaps nothing should surprise her anymore. "Very well," she said, rising and straightening her stola. "I will see him in the atrium." As she moved through the shadowed hallways of her ancestral home, Cassia felt a strange certainty that whatever waited beyond this night would irreversibly change what remained of her life. The atrium of Villa Aurelia had once hosted Rome's elite, its impluvium pool reflecting flickering torchlight onto marble busts of Valerian ancestors. Now the water was stagnant, the statues dulled with dust. Into this faded grandeur stepped a man who seemed to fill the space by his presence alone. Maximus the Thracian stood taller than any man Cassia had ever seen, his broad shoulders and massive frame making even the spacious atrium feel confining. Yet it wasn't his size that commanded attention, but the stillness with which he held himself, the economy of movement that spoke of lethal capability held in perfect control. His face bore the map of his arena history, a scar bisecting one eyebrow, another along his jaw, and countless smaller marks etched into skin burnished by sun and sand. His dark hair was cropped short in the gladiator style, and his eyes, deep-set and observant, assessed Cassia with unsettling directness. Lady Valeria. His voice was unexpectedly cultured, with just a trace of accent. He inclined his head slightly, not quite a bow, but an acknowledgement between equals. Cassia maintained her distance. "You claim to have business concerning my father. State it and be gone." From within his simple tunic, Maximus withdrew a wooden sword, a rudis, the symbol of a gladiator granted freedom. He held it across his palms like an offering. "Your father gave me this 6 years ago. I was condemned to die in the arena for striking a Roman officer who had killed a child. Senator Valerian was attending the games. When I defeated 3 opponents and still stood, tradition allowed him, as the highest-ranking official present, to decide my fate." Maximus's fingers traced the worn wood. "He granted me the rudis when the crowd called for my death." Cassia's breath caught. She remembered that day, her father returning home troubled by the bloodlust he had witnessed, speaking of a foreign warrior with unusual honor. "My father was known for his mercy," she said, unwilling to reveal her recollection. "Not mercy." Maximus's expression hardened. Recognition. One man seeing the worth of another, beyond the circumstances of birth or station. "I swore that day I would repay this debt should the opportunity arise." His eyes met hers. "Now it has." Before Cassia could respond, 3 more figures emerged from the shadows of the entryway. They moved with the same controlled precision as Maximus, though each was distinct. A lean, keen-eyed Greek, a sinewy archer with distinctive Parthian tattoos, and a dark-skinned man whose fingers never strayed far from the knives at his belt. "My brothers in the arena," Maximus explained. "Darius of Athens, tactician and former naval strategist. Alton of Parthia, whose arrows never miss. And Nasir of Numidia, who can move through darkness like a shadow." The men inclined their heads in turn, their eyes assessing Cassia with the wariness of those accustomed to seeking threats. "I did not invite an army into my home," Cassia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Not an army. A shield." Maximus stepped forward. "Rome speaks of your situation, Lady Valeria. Your enemies circle like vultures. I offer you what your position cannot now provide, protection by men whose loyalty cannot be bought." "And what payment do you seek for this protection?" Cassia asked, suspicion edging her voice. "None. A debt repaid requires no payment. I am to believe that gladiators, men who shed blood for coin and crowd favor, now act from honor alone?" Her skepticism was cutting. For the first time, a smile touched Maximus's scarred face, brief and unexpected as lightning. "We fight for coin because Rome gives us no choice. But how we fight, that remains our own." A sudden commotion at the entrance interrupted them. Gallus appeared, flustered and pale. "My lady, men from Senator Severus, they demand entry to assess the property for valuation." Before Cassia could respond, Maximus nodded to his companions. With fluid coordination, they moved toward the entrance, positioning themselves in a formation that suggested long practice. "Your permission?" Maximus asked, his hand resting on a sword hilt that hadn't been visible a moment before. Something shifted in Cassia, a recognition that principles must sometimes yield to pragmatism. Her father, for all his ideals, had understood this. Perhaps that was why he had saved the gladiator before her. "Granted," she said quietly, "but no bloodshed on Valerian grounds." Maximus inclined his head. "As you command." As he turned to join his men, Cassia noted how the wooden rudis disappeared back into his tunic, close to his heart. Perhaps there was more to this man than arena sand and battle scars. Whether that made him more dangerous or more valuable remained to be seen. By morning, Villa Aurelia had transformed. The warriors had worked through the night, turning the once elegant estate into something resembling a military encampment. The fallen section of perimeter wall had been reinforced with salvage timber. Sight lines were established from strategic points. Even the garden's ornamental trees had been trimmed to eliminate hiding places. Cassia surveyed these changes from her father's study with mixed emotions. The practical side of her appreciated the increased security. The patrician in her recoiled at seeing her ancestral home so altered. "Your men are efficient," she acknowledged when Maximus joined her, his massive frame making the study feel suddenly smaller. "Former soldiers, most of them, before they became arena fodder." He spoke matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "The men who came yesterday, they left quickly." A smile tugged at Cassia's lips despite herself. "Yes." Severus's clerk seemed particularly distressed when Nasir began testing the balance of his knives. "Nasir has that effect." Something resembling amusement flickered in Maximus's eyes before his expression returned to its habitual vigilance. "They'll return with more men." "Undoubtedly," Cassia sighed, turning toward the window. "But perhaps with less certainty than before." The courtyard below had been divided, warriors establishing quarters in the outer sections while leaving the inner areas to Cassia and her household. Even now, Darius was supervising as men constructed sleeping pallets from spare timber. Their efficiency spoke of military training far beyond arena combat. "You're Greek, Darius." "He was more than a common soldier," Cassia observed. "Naval strategist for Athens before his ship was taken by Roman vessels. Many arena fighters were men of standing before fate intervened." Maximus's tone suggested he included himself in this category. Their conversation was interrupted by raised voices from the courtyard. A woman had entered, tall and striking, with hair braided severely away from a face marked by quiet determination. Several warriors greeted her with evident respect. "Livia," Maximus explained. "Arena physician. Tends wounds others declare fatal." "A woman? Working among gladiators?" Cassia couldn't hide her surprise. "Death makes poor distinction between men and women. Livia understands this better than most." The cryptic statement hung between them as they watched Livia efficiently organize medical supplies brought from a cart. Later that afternoon, Cassia encountered Livia in the kitchen gardens, gathering herbs with the confidence of someone who knew their properties intimately. "These strengthen the blood," Livia explained when she caught Cassia watching, holding up sprigs of a plant Cassia didn't recognize. Her Latin was accented but precise. "For the fighter with the chest wound." "You were trained as a physician?" Cassia asked, curiosity overcoming her natural reserve. "In my homeland, women of my family have always healed." Livia's eyes, gray and direct, said Cassia. "You are not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" "A weeping Roman noble, helpless without men to direct her." Livia's frankness was startling. "Maximus speaks of your father with respect rare for him. I wondered what daughter such a man would raise." Before Cassia could respond, a commotion at the villa's entrance drew their attention. A messenger in Senator Severus's household livery stood at the gate, refused entry by Alton and another warrior. Cassia approached, conscious of Livia following close behind. "I bear a message from Senator Lucius Severus," the young man announced, visibly intimidated by the warriors but maintaining his composure. "Speak it," Cassia replied, keeping her distance. "The senator expresses concern over reports of armed men occupying a noble Roman household. He reminds Lady Valeria that harboring gladiators outside official ludus quarters violates city ordinances and may constitute further evidence of the Valerian family's disregard for proper Roman order." Cassia felt rather than saw Maximus approach from behind, his presence suddenly looming over the scene. "Tell your master," Maximus said to the messenger, his voice carrying effortlessly across the courtyard, "that these men are free citizens exercising their right to associate with whom they choose. The Rudis grants this privilege, as Senator Severus well knows." The messenger swallowed visibly, eyes fixed on Maximus's imposing figure. The senator also wishes to inform Lady Valeria that he will be raising the matter of the Valerian estate's disposition before the Senate 3 days hence. He suggests she prepare accordingly. With that, the messenger retreated hastily, clearly relieved to escape. 3 days, Darius mused, joining the group. A tactical error. He gives us time to prepare. Or a deliberate warning meant to intimidate, Cassia countered. Either way, Maximus said, we have work to do. That evening, the villa's dining room hosted an unlikely gathering. A Roman noblewoman, 4 former gladiators, 3 loyal household slaves, and an arena physician. As they discussed strategy over a simple meal, Cassia realized the courtyard's division had already begun to blur, physical space reflecting the unprecedented alliance forming within these ancient walls. The study of Senator Marcus Valerian had remained largely untouched since his execution. For Cassia, it had become both sanctuary and mausoleum, a place where her father's presence lingered in the carefully arranged scrolls, the worn indentation on his writing chair, the faint scent of cedar and ink that still clung to the air. Now, the space hummed with new purpose as Cassia and Darius methodically examined her father's records. The Greek's scholarly approach complemented Cassia's intimate knowledge of her father's organizational systems. Together, they searched for anything that might explain why a respected senator had been so abruptly condemned. Your father was meticulous, Darius observed, carefully unrolling a scroll containing trade manifests. His hands, surprisingly elegant for a fighter, handled the delicate papyrus with practiced care. These records go back nearly a decade. He believed proper governance required proper accounting, Cassia replied, sorting through tablets recording Senate votes. Every transaction, every political decision, all documented. As morning stretched into afternoon, they assembled a timeline of Senator Valerian's final months. His attention had increasingly focused on the grain trade, Rome's lifeline. Notes in the margins of official records questioned discrepancies between reported imports and distributed quantities. He was investigating theft, Darius concluded, arranging several documents in sequence. On a massive scale. Cassia nodded slowly. The grain supply is sacred to Rome. Interfering with it is treason, Darius finished. Unless you're not the thief, but the one who discovered the theft. The realization crystallized in Cassia's mind. My father wasn't guilty of treason. He was silenced for uncovering it. Their concentration broke at the sound of heavy footsteps. Maximus entered, his height requiring him to duck slightly beneath the doorframe. Alton has returned from the city, he announced. Severus has been meeting with mercenaries, former legionaries discharged for discipline problems. He's building a private force. Cassia and Darius exchanged glances. This suggests he fears legal proceedings won't be enough, Darius said. Or that he plans to ensure they are, Cassia countered. She hesitated, then asked Maximus, You knew my father. Did he ever speak to you about the grain trade? A shadow crossed Maximus's face. Once. After granting me the rudis, he visited the gladiator quarters, unprecedented for a senator. He spoke of Rome's hunger growing while ships full of grain mysteriously disappeared. Said some in the Senate were profiting from empty stomachs. Did he name Severus? No. But he mentioned pirates growing bold in waters where Roman patrols should have been. Said it was curious how some senators always knew which ships to invest in, and which to avoid. Cassia turned back to the scattered documents, her mind racing. We need more evidence. Something concrete linking Severus to these discrepancies. Their search intensified, extending into the evening. It was Cassia who finally discovered the hidden compartment in her father's desk, a subtle mechanism that released only when pressure was applied to specific points simultaneously. Inside lay a single scroll sealed with plain wax, no family crest that might identify its origin. With trembling fingers, Cassia broke the seal. The document contained correspondence between an unnamed senator and a pirate captain operating near Sicily. It detailed arrangements for specific merchant vessels to be redirected, their cargoes stolen but reported lost to storms. profits would be shared through a complex system of intermediaries. Though the senator remained unnamed in the text, the meeting locations and dates corresponded precisely with entries in Severus's public schedule. "This is it," Cassia breathed. "Proof of Severus's collusion with pirates." "Enough to bring before the Senate?" Maximus asked. Darius frowned. "Perhaps. But Severus has allies. They could claim the document is forged." "Then we need more," Cassia said with newfound determination. "And we need to move before Severus realizes what we've found." That evening, Cassia ventured into the courtyard where the warriors trained. She had avoided watching their practice, uncomfortable with the reminder of their violent profession. Now she observed with new perspective. Livia approached, offering a cup of watered wine. "They train to protect you now, not to entertain crowds." "I know," Cassia admitted. "I'm beginning to understand there's more to all of you than Rome permitted me to see." Across the courtyard, Maximus demonstrated a defensive technique to the younger men. His movements were precise, controlled, the violence contained and directed. When he caught Cassia watching, he paused almost imperceptibly before continuing his instruction. "Tomorrow," Cassia told Livia, "I need to learn to defend myself. Nothing elaborate, just enough to survive if necessary." Livia's eyes widened slightly, then she nodded with approval. "We begin at dawn." As darkness fell over Villa Aurelia, Cassia felt something unfamiliar stirring within her, not just the determination to clear her family's name, but a growing resolve to fight back against those who had taken everything from her. The path forward was dangerous, but for the first time in months, it existed. Dawn filtered through the villa as Cassia stood in the small courtyard garden, dressed in a simple tunic rather than her usual stola. Her muscles ached from Livia's training the previous day, basic defensive movements designed not for combat but for creating opportunity to escape. The physical exertion had been unfamiliar but strangely liberating. Again, Livia instructed, circling Cassia with critical eyes. "Remember, your strength is not in matching force but in redirecting it." Cassia repeated the movement, a pivot and deflection that used an attacker's momentum against them. Her body was learning what her mind still questioned, that a patrician woman could defend herself when necessary. Their practice paused as Darius entered the courtyard, a rolled parchment in hand. "We've completed the market square assessment." Cassia nodded, accepting a cloth from Livia to wipe perspiration from her face. For 2 days, they had been planning her return to public life, a strategic appearance in Rome's forum to counter rumors and establish presence before Severus could present his petition to the Senate. Inside, the dining room had been converted to a planning chamber. Spread across the table was a detailed map of Rome's main marketplace, identifying key positions, sight lines, potential escape routes, and the locations of allies and enemies. "The forum will be crowded," Darius explained, indicating the central market area. "Market day brings people from all districts. Your appearance must be timed precisely, visible enough to be noticed, brief enough to withdraw before any organized response." Maximus stood at the table's end, arms crossed. "Nasir will move ahead to watch for Severus's men. Alton positions here." He pointed to an elevated portico, with clear views of all approaches. "Darius and I will remain with Lady Valeria." Cassia studied the map, the political landscape as familiar to her as the physical one. "I should greet Portia Liciniia first," she indicated the Temple of Vesta. "Her family has been cautiously neutral. Public acknowledgement from me forces her to either respond courteously or snub a Valerian openly." "And if she chooses to snub?" Maximus asked. "Then everyone witnessing knows exactly where the battle lines are drawn." Cassia's time in isolation had not dulled her understanding of Roman social politics. "Either way, I gain information." As midday approached, Cassia prepared in her chambers, Demetria and Livia assisting. The selection of attire was itself a political statement. She chose the dignified garments of a Roman matron rather than the more ornate styles of unmarried nobility. The deep blue of her stola signaled continued mourning while maintaining dignity. Around her neck, she placed her mother's silver necklace bearing the Valerian crest, a public reclamation of her lineage. "Your hair, my lady?" Demetria asked, fingers poised with combs. "Simple but formal," Cassia decided. "I am not attending a celebration." When Cassia emerged into the atrium, she found Maximus and his men waiting. They too had transformed their appearance, clean-shaven, wearing simple but respectable tunics that disguised weapons while marking them as free men rather than slaves. Only their watchful eyes and disciplined posture hinted at their true capabilities. Maximus himself had exchanged his gladiator's attire for the clothing of a provincial merchant, a role his size and foreign features could plausibly support. The change did little to diminish his imposing presence, but redirected perceptions of his purpose. "Remember," Darius advised as they prepared to depart, "this appearance is not about confrontation but visibility. Be seen, be acknowledged, then withdraw." The journey to the forum passed in tense silence. As they approached the market square, the sounds and scents of Rome's public life enveloped them, merchants calling their wares, animals being led to sacrifice, citizens debating the latest political rumors. For Cassia, it was both familiar and jarringly new after months of seclusion. Their entrance was carefully choreographed. Nasir had gone ahead, melding invisibly with the crowd. Alton took position above, a silent guardian with an archer's perspective. Darius walked slightly ahead of Cassia, while Maximus followed just behind, a formation that created space around her while maintaining protection. The first recognition came from a spice merchant who had often supplied Villa Aurelia. His startled, "Lady Valeria," caused nearby heads to turn. Like ripples in water, awareness of her presence spread across the marketplace. Conversations paused. Glances turned to stares. The daughter of the disgraced senator, supposedly in mourning seclusion, now walked among them with the composure of one who had nothing to hide. Cassia moved with deliberate grace toward the temple steps where several noble women had gathered. She felt the weight of every gaze, heard the whispers following in her wake. Beside her, Darius maintained alert vigilance disguised as casual attendance. Behind her, Maximus's presence alone created a buffer that even the most curious onlookers hesitated to breach. This was the gambit upon which everything else would build, not a battle of swords but of perception. Rome functioned on appearances as much as reality. Today, Cassia Valeria would begin reclaiming both. The cool evening air carried the scent of cypress and, "To be continue,"